Chapter 26, Physical Modification Experiment. The month of books, August, in the legends of the Starlight Continent, was the month of knowledge and wisdom. As time entered the month of books, Sunan became busy, immersing himself in learning and self-improvement. First on his agenda was learning new spells. He currently only had 2 first-ring spells, Charm Human and Shield Technique. The effect of the former was obvious from its name. The latter could create an invisible, tower shield-sized barrier that floated and rotated around the caster, providing 360-degree protection against attacks. Since shield technique was essentially a force field effect, it could even block incorporeal attacks like mental assaults and soul damage. Prioritizing his safety, Sunan naturally chose to learn shield technique first. Reading Shield Technique Spell Model, Shield Technique Learning Progress plus 0.02%. First ring spells were far more complex than zero-ring spells. Sunan estimated that even with the aid of the activity potion, it would take him about 40 days to master shield technique. Mastering Charm Human would likely take a similar amount of time. The second item on his agenda was creating rune gems. For his first attempt, Sunan chose the relatively stable earth energy particles. He also selected black opal, a gem compatible with force field protection properties. It's a pity that star-colored sapphire is too expensive, costing over 1,000 gold coins per gem. Otherwise, using it would yield better results, Sunan thought with regret. Using star-colored sapphire as a medium would at least double the power of the final product. However, that would be an extravagant use of funds, and he couldn't afford it at the moment, so he had to settle for black opal. Black opal was a green opal with black spots and golden particles, possessing a unique beauty. As Sunan infused the condensed earth yellow energy rune into the gem, it emitted a hazy glow. The glow lasted only 4 or 5 seconds before quickly dissipating. The black opal seemed unchanged, but upon closer inspection, one could see that it was now etched with mystical patterns. Successfully created a rune gem, magic item creation learning progress plus 0.5%. Hey! Sunan was surprised. Why did this trigger the magic item creation skill? But after a moment of thought, he understood. Energy runes were a branch of enchantment, and the item created by combining energy runes with a gem could technically be considered a magic item. Triggering the magic item creation skill wasn't surprising. I initially thought I needed to find relevant books to trigger this skill, but I unexpectedly triggered it in advance. Sunan looked at the rune gem in his hand. The tiny gem contained a concentrated amount of earth energy particles. Activating the energy within would instantly create an earthen protective layer around him. Compared to spells that required casting time, rune gems, which could be activated instantly, were undoubtedly more practical in combat. Their only drawback was the cost. Since he already had the defensive spell shield technique, Sunan only created 2 earth rune gems before moving on to create offensive ones. After all, the offensive spells he had mastered were all zero-ring, lagging behind his current level. Rune gems could compensate for this deficiency in his attack methods. Lightning, Flame, Frost, Shadow. Except for the Flame rune, which used red zircon, the gem most compatible with fire, the other 3 offensive energy runes used ruby, suitable for shaping spells. Sunan created 3 of each type of rune gem for backup. In addition, he also created 2 plant-based rune gems for healing injuries. Including the ones that were damaged due to errors, Sunan ultimately consumed 18 gems, worth over 300 gold coins. Rune gems are quite the money sink, he sighed inwardly. It was fortunate that he had the support of Black Rock City. Otherwise, he wouldn't even be able to afford collecting wizard books, let alone creating rune gems. Creating the rune gems took a lot of time. When he finally finished, it was already late at night. Sunan cleaned himself using energy particles and returned to the meditation room, intending to meditate instead of sleeping and recover the spiritual power he had expended. Even after his advancement, Sunan still maintained his daily limit of 4 hours of meditation. However, as his spiritual power increased, its growth rate slowed. Now, he could only increase his spiritual power by 0.01 to 0.02 points per day on average. And this was with the aid of the activity potion. To advance to a level 3 wizard apprentice, I need to construct 9 star rings and have my spiritual power reach over 30 points. At this rate, it will take at least 10 years, or even longer, to advance. 10 years to advance from level 2 to level 3 was considered incredibly fast in the current Starlight Continent. But Sunan wasn't satisfied. He was already considering whether to synthesize higher level potions to aid his meditation. However, that would mean spending even more gold coins each month. Even with a mine at his disposal, he couldn't afford such extravagant expenses. Unless I retake flashing territory and increase the territory's income, Sunan mused, his eyes narrowing. After a moment, he shook his head, putting those thoughts aside and focusing on his meditation. The next day, Sunan went to the room where the monitor lizard was held captive. Confined in a cramped cage, subjected to daily blood draws and energy drainage, the monitor lizard had suffered greatly over the past month. Seeing Sunan enter, it merely lifted its eyelids before lying motionless on the ground, looking utterly dejected. Sunan opened the metal cage, used mage hand to lift the monitor lizard, and then brought it to the spacious laboratory, placing it on the experimental table. To accommodate the lizard's massive size, he had specially ordered a table over 10 meters long. Although he had decided to transform the monitor lizard into a magical pet, Sunan didn't act immediately. Any creature, after being transformed into a magical pet, would awaken at least one spell-like ability. The type of ability awakened mainly depended on the creature's own abilities. For example, felines usually awakened illusion or shadow stealth abilities. Snakes typically awakened poison-related abilities. As for this mutant with dragon lizard bloodline, Sunan guessed that it would most likely awaken a physical enhancement ability. For a wizard apprentice, this type of ability was undoubtedly the least desirable. Wizard apprentices had plenty of ways to enhance their physique, there was no need to waste a precious awakening opportunity on it. Therefore, before officially forming the contract, Sunan planned to perform a physical modification on the monitor lizard, granting it an additional ability. This might allow it to awaken something other than a physical enhancement ability during the transformation. As for the direction of the modification, the book extraction and modification of the green chameleon's abilities would come in handy. Although you're not a chameleon, you're both lizards, so your compatibility with the camouflage ability shouldn't be low. Sunan beckoned with his hand, and a cage on the table behind him floated over, landing in his palm. Inside the cage was a green chameleon. Although this creature wasn't quite a magical creature, it was still relatively rare. He had to ask Mu Zhou of the Firefox Trading Company to find enough for his experiments. Swish! Sunan beckoned again, and a sharp scalpel landed in his hand. The monitor lizard finally sensed danger and began to struggle frantically, but its weakened body couldn't break free from Mage Hand's grasp. It whimpered, its vertical pupils filled with pleading. "Don't worry, you'll be fine. After the experiment, you'll become even stronger." Sunan cast a sleep curse. The monitor lizard's eyelids fluttered, and it quickly fell asleep, its struggles ceasing. The sound of a blade cutting through flesh echoed through the laboratory. Note: KYI will be K from now on. Chapter 28, Magical Pet Hidden Dragon. Blackstone Castle, Courtyard. Sunan stood in front of the banyan tree, staring intently at the trunk. To the naked eye, there was nothing in front of the trunk, and even upon close inspection, nothing could be discerned. Only Sunan could perceive that something indeed existed there. "Charge!" Sunan suddenly commanded. The moment his words fell, a piercing whistle echoed through the air. Although nothing was visible, a distinct rustling sound could be heard, as if some creature was rapidly crawling along the ground. At that moment, a subtle distortion finally appeared in the previously empty void. "Done," Sunan stated. The next moment, over 10 meters away, the figure of a giant lizard materialized out of thin air. Its amber vertical pupils reflected a human-like eagerness, letting out a low, pleading call, seemingly seeking Sunan's praise. Sunan chuckled and said, "Good job." After more than half a month of experiments and over 10 failures, he finally succeeded in transferring the color-changing ability of the green chameleon to the giant lizard and further enhancing its effect. Now, with the ability to change color, the giant lizard could instantly alter its form to match the environment, achieving near invisibility. Only during high-speed sprints would it leave a slight trace due to the lag in form transformation. Of course, unless it was a wizard apprentice or a knight with exceptional eyesight, ordinary people could not detect this trace at all. However, this ability did have its drawbacks. When stationary, it was fine, but once it started moving, the sound of its footsteps and the friction with objects would reveal its location. Sunan had no good solution for this. After all, even the true invisibility spell had the same flaws. Flaws are just flaws. The color-changing ability is merely a foundation for transforming magical pets. I hope you can awaken even more powerful abilities based on this color-changing ability. The giant lizard didn't quite understand Sunan's words and let out a cautious low call. Sunan didn't mind, he used his mage hand to scoop up the giant lizard and walked into the laboratory. This was a temporary laboratory that had been cleared out. On the floor, a contract formation composed of countless intricate patterns had already been drawn, shining with a faint dark hue under the candlelight, radiating an indescribable sense of wonder. He placed the giant lizard in the center of the formation and then cast a sleep spell, causing the somewhat anxious giant lizard to fall into a deep slumber. Sunan then used a small knife to cut his thumb and pressed it against the edge of the formation. As blood flowed along the lines, the formation suddenly glowed brightly. Countless black and red mists emerged from thin air, swirling around to envelop and cover the giant lizard's massive body, seeping into its rough, thick skin. Crack! Crack! A series of crunching sounds erupted suddenly as the giant lizard's bones expanded, piercing through its thick skin, glimmering white in the air. In a short time, the giant lizard's entire body resembled a giant skeleton nearing 10 meters in length, draped in tattered flesh, curled up on the ground, nearly filling the entire laboratory floor. Sunan had to retreat to the doorway, but his gaze never wavered from the giant lizard, gripping a plant rune gem in his hand, ready to activate it to heal the giant lizard at any moment. The transformation process for magical pets was not 100% successful. The stronger the creature, the lower the success rate of transforming it into a magical pet. For a creature like the giant lizard, which possessed dragon lizard blood, the failure rate was at least over 50%. Even with the assistance of a rune gem, it could only marginally increase the success rate. The giant lizard's bones continued to grow, quickly exceeding 15 meters, but there were no signs of flesh proliferation, resembling a skeletal giant lizard. Seeing this, Sunan decisively activated the rune gem, and a gentle green light enveloped the giant lizard's entire body. However, the giant lizard remained motionless, showing no changes. Did it fail? Sunan frowned, sighing. But in the next second, a sudden change occurred. Countless black oval scales, the size of an adult's palm, suddenly grew on the giant lizard's tattered skin, spreading rapidly across its body at a visible speed, quickly covering the exposed bones. Once those scales formed, their smooth surfaces flashed under the candlelight, gradually blending into the surrounding environment, ultimately completely concealing the giant lizard's massive body. Color-changing ability? No, wait, it seems a bit different. Just as Sunan was filled with doubt, the disappeared giant lizard suddenly reappeared, its appearance having undergone a tremendous transformation compared to before. The original giant lizard was already 7 or 8 meters long, a true beast, but after the transformation, its body had swollen to more than double, resembling a small mountain. However, despite its massive size, it was still slender compared to its length, appearing not bulky but rather extremely swift and agile. It rushed up to Sunan, bending its body softly into a circle, its large pupils staring at him intently. Though its appearance was quite ferocious, through the deep connection, Sunan could feel the affection and closeness the giant lizard conveyed. Magical pets and their masters could sense each other's emotions within a certain distance, similar to telepathy, which wizards referred to as emotional connection. As the wizard's mental power increased, they would later develop shared vision, shared spells, and even more spell-like abilities. Moreover, the life of a magical pet was also bound to its master. Once the master died, the magical pet's body and soul would vanish. Thus, in the magical pet's perception, the master was the closest and most loyal being in the world. You've worked hard. Sunan reached out to stroke the giant lizard's head, and it let out a low, affectionate call, cautiously rubbing its massive head against his hand, showing intimacy. Against its massive size, there was an inexplicable sense of contrast. Let's go outside to test your abilities. The man and lizard quickly moved to the courtyard. The transformation process for the magical pet had taken quite some time, and night had already fallen outside. At Sunan's command, the giant lizard leaped forward with incredible agility, soaring 4 or 5 meters into the air, and under the moonlight, its slender body suddenly vanished from head to tail. Then, a loud crack was heard as a nearby banyan tree inexplicably broke, and a massive branch crashed to the ground. Both strength and physical power have significantly increased. In terms of physique alone, it's probably no longer inferior to a great knight, but we still need to test it further. The giant lizard's physical strength and color-changing ability had both been enhanced differently, however, these were already existing powers, clearly not newly awakened abilities. Sunan continued to watch expectantly. After charging forward a distance, the giant lizard reappeared and turned back to crash into a tree stump again. But this time, its body suddenly transformed into nothingness midway, passing through the tree stump like a phantom. This is the ability of reality transformation. Sunan's face lit up with delight. From the giant lizard's previous performance, it seemed it could instantly transform its body into a phantom, allowing it to traverse obstacles. Knowing that the transformed giant lizard already possessed powerful destructive power and agile speed, combined with the color-changing ability and the ability to pass through obstacles, it was simply the perfect killer. Its combat power had instantaneously increased by several levels. What a perfect combination of abilities! Sunan couldn't help but exclaim. The reality transformation ability instantly compensated for the flaw of the color-changing ability, which couldn't conceal sound, and now the giant lizard possessed a truly perfect invisibility ability. Upon hearing Sunan's words, the giant lizard let out an excited, triumphant roar. Sunan smiled slightly. We can't keep calling you giant lizard anymore, we need to give you a new name. After a moment of thought, he quickly came up with an idea. Let's call you Hidden Dragon. Chapter 29, Sunan's strength is Blackstone City's strength. Blackstone City in the autumn veil month, October, already had a hint of desolation. Although there was still some time before the first snowfall, the air had become much colder, no longer the heat of the harvest moon. 4 armored men walked along the path in the inner courtyard, their breath forming visible white mist in the chilly air. 3 younger men following behind showed unmistakable excitement and anticipation on their faces, as if something good was about to happen. After a moment, one of them couldn't help but ask the man in front, Lord Jordan, is there anything we need to pay attention to when taking the secondary dragon blood potion? Jordan turned to glance at the young man, waving his hand casually. Look at you all, so nervous. Nearly 100 people have taken the secondary dragon blood potion before you, and I haven't seen any issues. Just relax. The young man scratched his head, a bit embarrassed. I'm not worried, I'm just really excited. After drinking that potion, I'll be able to become a knight. The other 2 nodded eagerly in agreement. After all, a knight was a knight. Revered as battle beasts and the reserve of the nobility. They had trained hard for many years, hoping to achieve knighthood and bring glory to their families, never expecting that this dream would come true so quickly. This left them feeling as if they were in a dream. Haha, I can understand how you feel. A year ago, I never would have imagined there was a potion that could allow a squire to directly break through to knighthood. All of this thanks to Lord Sunan. Mentioning Sunan, Jordan's tone was filled with respect. The 3 young men instinctively showed expressions of awe and admiration. Although news about Lord Sunan in Blackstone City was tightly sealed, everyone who had taken or was about to take the secondary dragon blood potion, squires, knew just how much effort Sunan had put in for Blackstone City's current development. Even the establishment of the Black Rock Cavalry could be said to be entirely attributed to Lord Sunan's efforts. In the hearts of the knights and squires in Blackstone City, Sunan's status was no lower than that of the Lord. Anyway, you don't need to be too nervous. When we see the Lord later, after you take the potion, you'll be fine. Before Jordan could finish his comforting words, he suddenly felt a chill run down his back, as if something brushed past him in an instant, making his skin crawl. He instinctively stopped and looked around, but saw nothing unusual. Did you see anything? Jordan asked the 3 young men behind him. They shook their heads in confusion. Strange. Did I drink too much last night, and my head is still not clear? Jordan slapped his head, muttering a few things before quickly dismissing the incident and continuing on. Before long, the 4 arrived at the training ground. From a distance, Jordan spotted the Lord and Braid standing at the entrance of the training area, seemingly discussing something. Nearby, 3 large wooden barrels were placed. As they got closer, Jordan could finally see that the barrels contained a light red liquid. He could even smell a faint, familiar pungent odor. It was the scent of the secondary dragon blood potion. Are these all secondary dragon blood potions? Jordan was taken aback but quickly realized that the scent in the air was somewhat faint. Unlike real potions, it must be diluted liquid. Move the barrels to the barracks. Every warrior who reaches the squire level should drink a bowl a day, and officers should have an extra bowl each day. Seeing Jordan and the others arrive, Kay instructed Braid and waved for him to leave, then turned his attention to the 3 young men. Lord! The 3 bowed in unison. Kay nodded solemnly and looked at Jordan. Is this batch only 3 people? Jordan nodded. The rest are squires who just broke through not long ago. Lord Sunan said it's best to wait a bit longer until they stabilize their strength before taking the potion. Hearing that it was Sunan's suggestion, Kay said no more and took out 3 vials of secondary dragon blood potion. The subsequent process was straightforward. The 3 young men took the potions on the spot. 2 of them broke through to knighthood immediately, while the remaining one, although not breaking through, would likely achieve it after a few days of training based on past experience. After encouraging the 3 newly promoted, probationary, knights, Kay signaled for Jordan to take them away and then left the training ground to head to the main building. Since the battle to eliminate the black scale lizards, Blackstone City had entered a period of rapid development. The number of knights had surged. Now, Blackstone City had over 100 knights. Looking across the entire Starry Principality, only noble territories above the rank of Viscount, developed over hundreds of years, could accumulate such a number of knights. For a city like Blackstone to have a knight count comparable to a Viscount territory was astonishing. If word got out, many would be left in shock. Unfortunately, the blood obtained from the elimination of the black scale lizards has been used up, and now we can only slowly draw blood from the captives. The speed of potion production on Sunan's side will also slow down considerably. On the other hand, it's good that the secondary dragon blood potions were used a bit too much recently, resulting in a gap among the squires in the army. This is a good opportunity to cultivate more squires. Kay thought of the dragon blood potion that Sunan had recently developed. Its effects far exceeded that of the secondary dragon blood potion. Just 4 vials had allowed him to cross a threshold that countless knights yearned for, stepping into the ranks of great knights. It was simply miraculous. The only downside was its extremely low yield. Up to now, besides him, only a few high-ranking knights like Braid had consumed it, enabling them to advance to peak knights. Unfortunately, what Blackstone City needs most now is time. Otherwise, give me a few years to develop, and reclaiming the shining territory would be a piece of cake. While pondering this, Kay suddenly saw the steward, old Geller, leading 6 or 7 servants, straining as they carried several shorn sheep. Old Geller quickly noticed Kay and stopped to bow. "Lord." Kay acknowledged him with a grunt and pointed at the sheep. "Where are they being taken?" Old Geller replied, "To Lord Sunan's yard." Kay quickly remembered that Sunan seemed to have a giant lizard caught from the black scale lizard tribe in his yard, which ate a considerable amount of meat every day. However, he glanced over the 3 sheep, feeling somewhat puzzled. Had that giant lizard's appetite increased significantly? Didn't Jordan just say it only needed 1 sheep a day? Curiosity aside, Kay didn't inquire further and waved for old Geller and the others to leave. Most things related to wizards carried an air of mystery and strangeness, making it hard for outsiders to understand. He also had no interest in delving deeper. He would just continue to support Sunan as usual. After all, Sunan's strength was Blackstone City's strength. Chapter 30, Blood Exchange to Exploit a Bug. In a brightly lit study, an air of tranquility filled the space. Occasionally, the sound of pages turning broke the silence. Sunan sat behind his desk, engrossed in reading. In the invisible void that others could not see, prompts indicating progress in spell learning appeared intermittently. He had already successfully mastered Shield spell. Now, he was studying Charm Human, with the progress bar exceeding 90%. In another 2 or 3 days, he would master it successfully. However, after that, he had no more spells to study. Although I commissioned the Firefox Trading Company, finding a suitable first ring spell is not easy. I wonder how that is progressing. Sunan closed the book and murmured to himself. Suddenly, his expression shifted, and he looked toward the door with a smile. "Where have you run off to now? You haven't been causing any trouble, have you?" "Hiss." In response came a raspy sound. As if lifting an invisible curtain, a giant lizard appeared near the doorway, shaking its head at Sunan. Perhaps having been confined in its cage for too long, the hidden dragon had fully let loose, running around the inner fortress every day. Thanks to its perfect abilities of color changing and reality transformation, it had not caused any panic. To this day, no one had noticed its existence, not even Kay, who was a great knight. Sunan couldn't help but marvel at his incredible luck. His first contracted magical pet had awakened such powerful abilities. In terms of physical strength, the hidden dragon was only at the level of a low-level great knight. However, with the color-changing and reality transformation abilities, even a high-level great knight could easily fall victim to the hidden dragon's ambush. Moreover, the hidden dragon had significant potential for physical strength development. The reason lay in its dragon-lizard bloodline. According to the information provided by the magic cube, the concentration of the dragon-lizard bloodline within the hidden dragon was currently at only 18.35%. If its bloodline concentration could be increased, it would significantly enhance the hidden dragon's power. Increasing the bloodline concentration, hey! A thoughtful look flickered in Sunan's eyes. He had tried giving the hidden dragon blood potions, but the effects were negligible. While the dragon blood potion contained components of sub-dragon blood, the effects had been altered to enhance physical conditioning. Even if the hidden dragon consumed it, the bloodline concentration wouldn't increase, it could only slightly enhance its physique. After contemplating for a long while, Sunan decided to take a different approach, directly perform a blood exchange on the hidden dragon. With the magic cube, he could extract dragon lizard blood from the hidden dragon, synthesize it into a higher grade sub-dragon blood, and then inject it back into the hidden dragon, achieving the goal of blood exchange. By repeatedly extracting blood, synthesizing it into a higher grade, and reinfusing it, he could continuously increase the hidden dragon's bloodline. It was worth a try. Does this count as exploiting a bug? Sunan chuckled at himself. Of course, this process would be rather lengthy. After all, the amount of synthesized blood would significantly decrease, and the reinfused blood would not compensate for what was drawn out. He would need to wait for the hidden dragon to regenerate its blood on its own. Thus, blood exchange could only be performed after a certain interval. As for extracting blood from the black-scale lizard captives, not only would the small amount of blood synthesized be negligible, but the incompatibility between different individuals would also increase the difficulty and risk of the blood exchange procedure, which was enough to dissuade Sunan from that idea. Nevertheless, blood exchange seemed quite feasible, and Sunan felt it was worth a shot. Just in time, my biotransformation skill has reached level 2, so performing a blood exchange should be easy. Under Sunan's keen gaze, the hidden dragon lying on the ground shivered suddenly, recalling the fear it felt during previous blood extractions. Late at night, the silver moon hung high in the sky, casting a veil like moonlight. In the darkness, two figures stealthily climbed over a wall and slipped into the courtyard. Looking at the silent courtyard, the two exchanged glances, both wearing puzzled expressions. How could the residence of the brother of the Lord of Blackstone City be so devoid of guards? Had the guards in the inner fortress of Blackstone City become this lax? If the guards at the other target were in the same situation, their assassination mission would be much easier. After a brief exchange of glances, the two men in dark clothing placed their hands on their sword hilts and moved silently toward the corridor deep within the courtyard. According to the information from their spies, Sunan rarely allowed servants into his yard, so they had no idea which room he slept in and had to search each room one by one. Fortunately, there were no guards here, so they didn't have to worry about being discovered due to prolonged searches. Under the cover of night, the two moved smoothly without encountering any obstacles. Yet, for some reason, they felt a lingering sense of unease, a chill creeping up their spines, as if they were being watched by some dangerous presence. However, looking around, there was not a single shadow in sight. The two dismissed their feelings as overcaution and shook their heads, continuing their infiltration. As they crossed the courtyard, they reached the end of the long corridor. Seeing the tightly shut door at the end of the corridor, they both instinctively tightened their grips on their swords and quietly unsheathed them. However, just as they drew their swords, their inner sense of unease suddenly intensified, a cold dread shooting up their spines. In that instant, both men felt a wave of fear wash over them. Years of combat experience led them to hesitate not for a moment, they decisively leapt to the sides. However, the man on the right had barely jumped 3 or 4 meters when his body suddenly froze in midair, his chest erupting with several arc-shaped blood holes, twisting his head and feet into an unnatural angle. The other assassin, landing and regaining his footing, looked up to see the scene, his pupils instantly shrinking to the size of pinheads. The bright moonlight shone through the spraying blood mist, revealing the outline of a giant beast over 10 meters long, covered in scales, with its limbs planted on the ground. Its mouth, filled with sharp teeth, was tightly clamped around his companion, blood pouring from the twitching body. It was evident that his companion was already beyond saving. By the stars above, what kind of monster is this? The man gasped in shock. He had encountered fierce beasts before, but a creature over 10 meters long that could turn invisible and had eluded their detection was something he had never heard of. Thud. The monster released the corpse, letting out a hissing sound, and its massive body slowly faded back into invisibility under the moonlight. The man felt his scalp tingle, and without a second thought, he turned to flee, dashing toward the courtyard wall, preparing to leap over it. But in the next second, he suddenly felt as if he had been violently struck by a massive rock, the sound of bones cracking ringing out as he was sent flying over 10 meters, landing heavily on the ground. Despite the severe blow, the man refused to give up. He coughed out a mouthful of blood and struggled to rise, wanting to escape. But then he felt a heaviness, as if something was pressing down on his back. The next second, a tide of pain crashed over him, drowning his consciousness. Chapter 31, Crushing Defeat. Sunan looked at the two mangled corpses in front of him, then glanced at the hidden dragon lying innocently on the ground. He couldn't help but twitch his lips. Through his connection with the magical pet, he had a rough idea of what had happened. As soon as the two assassins climbed over the courtyard wall, they were spotted by the hidden dragon, which had been sleeping in the courtyard. Initially, it was just curiously observing them. But once the two approached the corridor and drew their weapons, the hidden dragon marked them as enemies and launched a ferocious attack, resulting in the immediate elimination of both. "Next time, remember to leave one alive," he said, patting the hidden dragon's head before shifting his focus back to the corpses. From the muscle density and bone strength of the bodies, it was clear that both men were formal knights, at least of the high knight rank. The fact that two high-ranking knight assassins had been sent at once, along with their clear motive, indicated who was behind it. "Since they sent people after me, my brother is probably facing the same situation," Sunan thought, glancing toward the main building. He extended his senses and indeed heard a commotion in the distance. Narrowing his eyes, he cast a shield spell on himself, and a layer of blue aura enveloped him as he swiftly dashed out of the courtyard toward the main building. Behind him, the hidden dragon let out a hiss and leaped, vanishing into the night. In the courtyard before the main building, the sounds of clashing metal rang out. Led by Braid, over a dozen knights and an equal number of Black Rock Panthers were surrounding a tall, burly middle-aged man. Although they had the numbers advantage, Braid and the others were clearly at a disadvantage. In the moonlight, one could faintly see a very faint glow surrounding the middle-aged man. The weapons of the surrounding knights struck that glow, failing to break through, instead causing their hands to ache from the impact. In contrast, the middle-aged man could effortlessly send a knight flying with a single strike. Only Braid could barely block the enemy's attacks with his shield. Thanks to their numerical advantage, they were managing to hold their own. Not far away, Kay was embroiled in a fierce battle with a swordsman wielding a black sword, and it was evident that he was at a disadvantage. If it weren't for the fearless assault of the Black Rock Panthers, the situation would likely be even worse. When Sunan arrived in the courtyard, this was the scene he encountered. "Two high-ranking knight assassins really are a formidable presence," he remarked. With a quick scan of the area, he immediately assessed the assassin's strength and couldn't help but feel puzzled. Owen only had one great knight under his command, where had he hired two high-ranking knight assassins? In this day and age, great knights could enjoy a seat of honor in any territory and would never stoop to being lowly assassins. However, this was not the time to ponder such things. Sunan's gaze sharpened, and he said in a deep voice, "Everyone step back." As soon as he spoke, Braid and the others immediately gave up their opponents and retreated in unison. The middle-aged knight was momentarily taken aback, furrowing his brow as he scrutinized Sunan. He could clearly sense that the moment this young man appeared, the over a dozen knights attacking him showed obvious signs of joy, their morale soaring. Clearly, the newcomer was not weak and had given them immense confidence. For a young man to command such respect and obedience from over a dozen knights, including a peak knight, his status in Blackstone City must be significant. Immediately, the middle-aged knight thought of the rumored wizard, Sunan. Seeing the young man's face only confirmed his suspicions further. "A wizard, hey?" The middle-aged knight narrowed his eyes, a serious expression crossing his face. Others might think wizards were just charlatans, but he had encountered some secret intelligence and knew that true wizards were mysterious and powerful individuals. As for whether Sunan was a real wizard, the two high-ranking knights sent to assassinate him could probably answer that. Just by Sunan's appearance here and the absence of those two, one could guess their fate. There was no doubt that this was a formidable opponent. Taking a deep breath, the middle-aged knight gripped his sword hilt tightly, regarding Sunan as a major threat. However, the next moment, it was as if he had been struck by a speeding carriage, and he was sent flying like a cannonball, crashing into a stone wall dozens of meters away. Boom! Debris flew everywhere, and dust rose in the air. The surrounding knights were all taken aback, their eyes wide with shock. What just happened? How did that guy suddenly fly out of the scene? Only Kay and the black sword-wielding knight caught a glimpse of what had transpired. At the instant the middle-aged knight was sent flying, they clearly saw a distortion in the air that outlined the silhouette of a giant beast. It was evident that the middle-aged knight had been attacked by that beast. The black sword knight was horrified. What kind of monster was this? It could even turn invisible. Before he could process this, a piercing scream erupted from the swirling dust, and a figure shot out like the wind. It was the middle-aged knight. But he now looked utterly battered. One of his arms hung limply at his side, bent at an unnatural angle, while a row of arc-shaped blood holes marred his chest and abdomen, resembling wounds inflicted by some savage beast. Blood soaked his entire body, leaving him in a pitiful state. Damn monster! The middle-aged knight roared in agony, and then, sensing something, he swung his sword backward. But the strike missed entirely. In the next second, a massive figure emerged from the other side, its huge claws with sharp, curved nails pierced through the middle-aged knight's body. Then it leaped high, viciously pinning the middle-aged knight down, opening its blood-filled maw, revealing rows of sharp teeth, and within moments, it tore his body apart into several pieces. The gruesome scene sent chills down everyone's spines. Braid and the others swallowed hard, their eyes filled with awe as they gazed at the giant beast. Even though it had grown more than twice its size, they recognized it as the giant lizard that Sunan had brought back from the black-scale lizard tribe. However, they had no idea why it had become so massive and could now vanish without a trace. Its terrifying combat power, easily crushing a great knight, was at least 10 times stronger than before. Kay and the Black Sword Knight had stopped fighting at some point, both staring in shock at the hidden dragon. While Kay's shock was tinged with delight, the Black Sword Knight was purely horrified. What was supposed to be a nearly certain assassination mission had gone awry from the very start. The intelligence had failed to mention that the target was surrounded by a significant number of knights and knight-level beasts. Especially those peculiar black rock panthers, the two had been unable to detect these creatures' presence, leading them to be noticed before they could even make a move. If it had just been that, it would have been manageable, they could have simply taken more time to complete their task. But what was up with this terrifying giant beast? The intelligence had never indicated that there was such a powerful and horrifying creature in Blackstone City. Chapter 32, Fortunately, it's one of us. Sunan looked coldly at the scene before him. With the strength of the middle-aged knight, even if he was no match for the hidden dragon, he shouldn't have been crushed so quickly. The key was that he completely underestimated the capabilities of the hidden dragon, he hadn't even realized it existed at first, leading to his swift demise. Sometimes, a lack of information could be fatal. Retracting his gaze, Sunan turned to the Black Sword Knight. Upon meeting Sunan's eyes, the Black Sword Knight felt an immediate chill run down his spine. He realized that the terrifying beast was being controlled by Sunan. Was this the power of a wizard? It truly was as enigmatic as the legends described. As his companion lay dead, the situation had become extremely unfavorable for the Black Sword Knight. In a flash of thought, he made a quick decision, transforming into a shadow and darting toward Sunan like a ghost in the night. If he could kill Sunan, the giant beast would likely fall into chaos, even if only for a moment, he could seize the opportunity to escape. Seeing the assassin charge directly at Sunan, the hidden dragon was still a dozen meters away and unable to provide timely assistance. Kay's expression changed dramatically, and he instinctively moved to intercept. But then he caught sight of Sunan's calm and unperturbed expression, causing him to halt in his tracks. Die! In the blink of an eye, the Black Sword Knight had covered over 100 meters, swinging his dark blade down fiercely. A crescent-shaped wave of sword energy formed out of thin air, shooting toward Sunan like a lightning bolt. Battle or a release. This was a technique of long-range attack that only great knights could master. As the sword energy was about to strike Sunan, a glint of joy flashed in the Black Sword Knight's eyes. But the next moment, his expression froze. In the astonished gazes of the onlookers, the sword energy seemed to hit an invisible object, dissipating with a hissing sound. The force of the collision stirred up a distorted shockwave, faintly outlining the shape of a tower shield. The Black Sword Knight's eyes widened in horror. What on earth was this? Before he could recover, Sunan raised his hand, holding a sparkling red gem between his index and thumb. Under the moonlight, the azure patterns on the gem glimmered beautifully, catching the eye. In the next second, Sunan hurled the gem. Boom! A thunderous roar resonated in everyone's ears, and a flash of lightning flickered across their vision. In an instant, the Black Sword Knight was sent flying like a kite with its string cut, crashing into a tall tree dozens of meters away. Crack! A tree trunk as thick as 2 men's arms snapped in two, the upper half crashing to the ground and kicking up a cloud of dust. As the dust settled, the onlookers focused their attention and discovered the Black Sword Knight lying on the ground, charred and motionless, completely unconscious. Silence enveloped the area. Everyone stared in shock at the scene, their mouths agape, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Even Kay looked dazed. While he had suspected that Sunan had a way to deal with the Black Sword Knight, he never expected it would be so clean and efficient. The Black Sword Knight hadn't even been able to exchange a single blow before being knocked out. And he was a great knight. Had Sunan really become this powerful without anyone noticing? No, Kay suddenly realized. It wasn't that Sunan had become stronger, it was that he had never seen Sunan fight at full strength, and he had no true understanding of Sunan's real capabilities. Even now, it was clear that Sunan had not gone all out. Just how powerful was he? Kay stared at Sunan in a daze. This younger brother, whom he had watched grow up, now seemed to possess an unfathomable depth. Tap, tap. Sudden, hurried footsteps shattered the silence in the courtyard. A large group of armored knights rushed into the courtyard, led by Jordan. Lord! We've come to support you. Where are the assassins? Halfway through his words, Jordan's voice came to an abrupt halt. He stared wide-eyed at the wreckage of the courtyard, the unharmed people, and the Black Sword Knight lying on the ground, blinking in confusion. Had it already been dealt with? By this time, Kay had regained his composure and ordered the soldiers to clean up the battlefield and take the Black Sword Knight away. After arranging everything, he approached Sunan, his expression grave. These were assassins sent by Owen. Sunan nodded calmly, this was something he could have guessed without much thought. But how did he find these assassins? Kay frowned. Organizations that dealt in assassination did exist in this world. But those were typically low-tier factions. Let alone high-ranking knight assassins, it was already impressive to find a knight-level assassin organization in the assassin world. At least, Kay and Sunan, both of noble birth, had never heard of any assassin organization with members of great knight rank. Sunan pondered for a moment before replying, Owen definitely doesn't have that kind of influence. Otherwise, he wouldn't have needed to bide his time until his father was in trouble before revealing his true colors. I suspect it's mostly likely connections from Marquis Jinyan. Kay's brow twitched, and the more he thought about it, the more he felt Sunan was right, causing his expression to darken further. He could handle Owen, but if Marquis Jinyan intervened, it would become troublesome. After all, the latter was the actual overlord of the Golden Rock province, with an army numbering in the tens of thousands. In comparison, Blackstone City was merely a larger ant before him. Seeing Kay's changing expression, Sunan reassured him, don't worry. The fact that Marquis Jinyan hasn't directly intervened indicates he still respects the noble rules and won't personally seize a vassal's territory. We just need to be cautious of the assassins he sends. Kay thought about it and felt relieved. As he returned to his senses and looked at Sunan's calm demeanor, he couldn't help but feel a bit ashamed. Clearly, he was the lord, yet he found himself less composed than Sunan in the face of danger. It seemed his temperament still needed some training. Little did he know that Sunan's calmness stemmed from his indifference toward the territory. Now that he had passed the most difficult initiation phase, even if the territory were taken from him, it would simply mean losing a stable source of income. He could easily take Kay and seek refuge in the kingdom of Jinhua, waiting to return and eliminate his enemies after advancing to wizard rank. As for making money, he had numerous methods. Of course, it would be better if he could keep the territory. After all, having his own power made it much more convenient to earn money and gather resources. However, he wouldn't share these thoughts openly with Kay. Not far away, Jordan was engaged in conversation with Braid, inquiring about the events that had transpired. After hearing Braid's account, Jordan's eyes widened as he scanned the surroundings. A giant lizard over 10 meters long that could easily crush a great knight? This was too surreal, it sounded like something out of a knight's novel. Seeing Jordan's eyes darting around in confusion, Braid remarked irritably, "Stop looking. I already told you that giant lizard can turn invisible. Even great knights can't detect its presence, do you really expect to see it?" Jordan scratched his head, embarrassed. "I'm just curious. Speaking of which, Lord Sunan is amazing. That giant lizard was only at the peak knight level before, but after just a few months of training, it can kill a great knight. It's simply unbelievable. The surrounding knights nodded in agreement, their expressions filled with admiration. Who wouldn't be impressed? Each time they witnessed Sunan's combat prowess, they felt their understanding of strength being reshaped. Fortunately, such a powerful ally was on their side, just thinking about it made their scalps tingle if he were an enemy. Chapter 33, Then let you speak for yourself. To avoid chaos, Kay ordered a lockdown regarding the attack. After uncovering a few lurking spies, the inner fortress swiftly returned to its usual state, operating smoothly as before. As for the Black Sword Knight, after a round of treatment that barely saved his life, he was imprisoned and subjected to interrogation. However, after 2 consecutive days, they had failed to extract any valuable information from him. That guy must have undergone anti-interrogation training. No matter what torture we apply, he refuses to speak, Braid reported in the council hall. I say, just break his bones one by one. I don't believe he can endure that, Jordan sneered. Braid shook his head. It's useless. He seems to possess some method to block pain, he didn't react at all during our torture. There's such a method! Jordan exclaimed, his eyes widening in surprise. The other knights exchanged glances, bewildered. How were they supposed to interrogate him now? Kay furrowed his brow and turned to Sunan, who was sitting nearby. Sunan, do you have any good ideas? Sunan nodded. Let me handle the interrogation. Upon hearing that Sunan seemed to have a solution, everyone perked up with renewed hope. Under Braid and Jordan's guidance, Sunan arrived at the prison where the Black Sword Knight was held. Entering the cell, he found the knight shackled to an iron pillar, looking utterly miserable. The remnants of the lightning rune gemstones covered his body, and after 2 days of torture, there was hardly a patch of unblemished flesh left. Even so, he showed no signs of pain. Seeing Sunan enter, his expression shifted slightly, quickly replaced by a disdainful sneer. Don't waste your efforts. You'll never get anything out of me. If you have the guts, just kill me. Sunan replied indifferently, if you really want to die, there are plenty of ways to do it. Why hang on like this? His words clearly struck a nerve with the Black Sword Knight, he twitched slightly at the corner of his eye and fell silent. Unfazed, Sunan calmly approached the Black Sword Knight. Since torture isn't working on you, let's see if you'll speak on your own. Upon hearing this, the Black Sword Knight's expression became even more dismissive. He was about to scoff again when he met Sunan's gaze, causing him to tremble. He felt as if Sunan's eyes were deep as an abyss, threatening to pull his very soul in. In just a few seconds, the Black Sword Knight's face grew blank, his eyes lost focus, as if he had entered a trance. Your name, Sunan said slowly. Uli Elric, the Black Sword Knight replied, his gaze vacant. Age: 32. Braid and Jordan, who were following Sunan, were completely stunned. What was happening? How had this guy suddenly become so compliant, answering every question without hesitation? They quickly realized that the knight's odd expression indicated that Sunan had likely used that strange power known as magic. They hadn't anticipated that such a spell could cause someone to lose their wits and obediently answer questions. Under this kind of power, didn't that mean everyone had no secrets? Braid and Jordan exchanged glances, their respect for Sunan growing. Sunan remained focused on the Black Sword Knight. The charm human spell could influence the target's perception to a degree, making them view the caster as a trustworthy ally. The caster could issue commands to the target, compelling them to do things they normally would not. However, commands that were clearly harmful to oneself, like suicide or self-harm, would likely fail and cause the spell to terminate. But for inquiries about information, the charm human spell was indeed very effective. Who sent you to assassinate the Lord of Blackstone City? Lord Casper, the Black Sword Knight replied blankly. A priest? Sunan raised an eyebrow. What is your affiliation? We belong to the Starfire cult, worshipping the great star god who created this continent. Even under the spell's influence, a hint of fervor appeared on the Black Sword Knight's blank face when mentioning the star god, revealing the depth of his belief. The Starfire cult? Sunan was surprised, he hadn't expected these assassins to come from the same cult that had attacked Baron Storm. What is your relationship with Marquis Jinyan? I don't know, the Black Sword Knight shook his head, still in a daze. Sunan frowned slightly. It was a given that Marquis Jinyan had connections with the Starfire cult. The fact that this guy didn't know indicated that the ones responsible for contacting Marquis Jinyan were likely higher-ranking members of the cult. How many of your companions are in Blackstone City? Counting me, there are 4 in total. Give me the names of the spies you know. The Black Sword Knight immediately recited 6 or 7 names. Among them were several spies that had been uncovered just days before. Without needing Sunan to instruct him, Braid dutifully noted down the names and hiding spots, then hurried off with Jordan to apprehend them. Sunan continued to inquire about the organizational structure of the Starfire cult, its branches, and the status of its members. According to the Black Sword Knight, the Starfire cult was an organization that worshipped the Star God and aimed to spread his great glory across the continent. They secretly collaborated with many nobles, assassinating competitors for those nobles in exchange for support, allowing the cult to grow rapidly over just over a decade, extending its reach throughout the Starry Principality. As for which nobles they had collaborated with, the Black Sword Knight didn't know much, only a few were barons or viscounts. Higher-ranking nobles were likely beyond his level of contact. After all, above the priest were the high priest, archpriest, and the pope who controlled the entire cult. Great knights are merely mid-level officers in that organization. It seems the Starfire cult has a solid foundation, Sunan mused. Earlier, he had speculated that the Starfire cult might be connected to wizard apprentices, but it seemed he had been mistaken. The Starfire cult clearly followed a religious belief route, entirely opposite to the pursuit of truth and the principle of self-empowerment typical of wizards. Regarding their bases, the Black Sword Knight also had limited knowledge, only knowing of 3 locations within the Golden Rock province. As for others in different provinces, he had no idea. After mentally noting the structure of the bases mentioned by the Black Sword Knight, Sunan inquired about the Starfire cult's activities in the Golden Rock province over the past years. He was taken aback by the revelations. It turned out that in the past 10 years, 7 or 8 noble deaths in the Golden Rock province had been orchestrated by the Starfire cult. They had caused a variety of accidental deaths, disguising them as misfortunes or illnesses. For more troublesome targets, they directly resorted to assassination. Among them was the father Sunan had never known. While he appeared to have died on the battlefield, in reality, the Starfire cult had sent someone to impersonate one of his guards before the war broke out, secretly striking him down on the battlefield and making it look like he fell to the enemy. Although the Black Sword Knight didn't know the true motives behind these assassinations, Sunan could guess that the mastermind was undoubtedly Marquis Jinyan. By eliminating vassal nobles and promoting puppets, he aimed to gain control over their territories. Marquis Jinyan's ultimate goal was to completely dominate the entire Golden Rock province. No, perhaps that wasn't even the final goal. To fully control the Golden Rock province, he didn't need to go to such extremes. Marquis Jinyan likely had even deeper objectives. Chapter 34, Clues of the Wizard Apprentice. Learning about Marquis Jinyan's conspiracy weighed heavily on Sunan's mind. Unless they abandoned their territory, they would inevitably clash with Marquis Jinyan in the future. Shaking his head, Sunan temporarily set aside this matter and continued questioning the Black Sword Knight. When he heard that the Starfire cult's branch in the Golden Rock province had recently mobilized to hunt down a magical creature, Sunan interrupted the Black Sword Knight, asking with interest, "What kind of magical creature?" "A cat." "A cat?" Sunan was momentarily stunned. He had expected a powerful and fierce magical beast to prompt such a large-scale mobilization by the Starfire cult, only to find out it was a cat. He thought back and realized he couldn't recall any formidable cat-like magical creatures. However, the starry continent was vast, and perhaps there were cat-like magical creatures he was unaware of. After pondering for a moment without any fruitful leads, Sunan pressed on with his questioning. "Why were you trying to capture that magical creature?" "It was the priest's order." "I don't know the specifics, but it seems to be related to wizards," the Black Sword Knight replied in a dazed manner. "We deployed a significant number of people, but that magical creature was quite cunning. Up until I came to Blackstone City for the assassination mission, I hadn't heard of anyone in the cult capturing it. A magical creature related to wizards, could it be a magical pet?" Sunan mused thoughtfully. However, from the Black Sword Knight's words, it seemed they had pursued the magical creature for quite some time without being intercepted, which indicated that it was likely unclaimed, not a typical magical pet. Curiosity piqued, Sunan further inquired about the details of the situation until he confirmed he could no longer extract useful information. He then lifted the spell. As the Black Sword Knight regained his senses, he displayed a look of shock and confusion. "What did you do to me?" The charm human spell did not erase the target's memories. The Black Sword Knight clearly remembered answering all of Sunan's questions earlier, which left him feeling horrified and unable to comprehend why he had acted so obediently. Sunan, however, had no intention of explaining. Without sparing a glance at the Black Sword Knight, he turned and left the prison, leaving the pale-faced knight questioning his very existence. Returning to the council hall, Kay, who had already heard the news from Braid, eagerly approached. Did he say anything else? Sunan, not hiding anything, recounted all he had learned about the Starfire cult. Upon hearing this, anger flared in Kay's eyes as he struck the armrest of his chair in frustration. I knew my father's death had to be connected to them. After a moment, he took a deep breath to calm himself and said, so, the attack on Baron Storm was also orchestrated by Marquis Jinyan from behind the scenes. Sunan nodded. Most likely. With Baron Storm attacked and in a coma, he can secretly intervene in the power struggle for the Baron's territory. By supporting a puppet, he could covertly control Baron Storm's territory. In the Golden Rock province, apart from the Marquis, the two most powerful lords were Barons Winterfrost and Storm. Baron Winterfrost had already aligned himself with Marquis Jinyan, sharing a close relationship. If Baron Storm's territory fell under Marquis Jinyan's control, he would be almost untouchable in the entire province. We still have a chance. Kay took a deep breath, his expression resolute. According to news from Baron Storm's side, his sons are currently at a standstill in their power struggle. Marquis Jinyan will surely focus his attention there for now, allowing us to seize the opportunity to retake Shining territory and gain leverage against him. If other nobles heard Kay's words, they would surely laugh at him for dreaming. How could a mere Shining territory possibly compete against the Marquis, who controlled more than half of the Golden Rock province? Yet Kay was filled with confidence. His source of confidence was undoubtedly Sunan, the wizard apprentice. With their control over Blackstone City, they had the strength to contend with a baron's territory. If they possessed an entire baron's territory, wouldn't they be able to challenge Marquis Jinyan? Seeing that Kay did not become dejected but instead was invigorated by the prospect of conflict, Sunan quietly nodded and brought up another matter. I plan to leave Blackstone City for a while. Kay paused in surprise, instinctively asking, where are you going? To Stone Bell City. Kay recalled that Stone Bell City was located within the territory of Viscount Silvermoon. What are you going there for? To find something, Sunan replied vaguely, not elaborating. Stone Bell City was where the magical creature the Starfire cult was pursuing had been sighted, according to the Black Sword Knight. Since arriving in this world, Sunan had discovered a lead about wizards for the first time, and he certainly couldn't let this opportunity slip by. Even if he ultimately found that the magical creature had nothing to do with wizards, it would still be worth the trip, perhaps there would be some additional gains. Moreover, although he currently lacked the strength to confront the Starfire cult directly, he was quite displeased about the assassination attempt on him and his brother. Finding that magical creature before the Starfire cult could also serve as a way to collect interest on the situation. Upon hearing Sunan's words, Kay didn't press further. After all, Viscount Silvermoon was part of the group of nobles that did not have close ties with Marquis Jinyan. In Silvermoon's territory, even if Marquis Jinyan and Owen wanted to do something, they would be unable to reach him, so there was no need to worry about Sunan encountering danger. When are you leaving? In a few days. Considering that this trip might involve confronting the Starfire cult, Sunan planned to prepare thoroughly. For example, he needed to create more rune gems for protection. And to continue strengthening the hidden dragon's abilities. Once he was fully prepared, he would head to Stone Bell City. After all, according to the Black Sword Knight, the Starfire cult had no means to capture that magical creature, and it should remain free for the time being. To avoid another assassination attempt, Kay decided to move to the barracks, where he would eat, sleep, and handle affairs. Unless a legendary knight intervened, he would hardly need to worry about someone assassinating him under the protection of over 1,000 soldiers and more than 300 knight-level warriors, including Black Rock Panthers. As he was about to leave Blackstone City, Sunan also upgraded Kay's Black Rock Panther to Great Knight level. Including the previous ones, this upgrade required a total of 42 Black Rock Panthers, costing nearly 1,600 gold coins. Even for Blackstone City, which had mining operations, the annual tax revenue was only enough to create 3 Great Knight level Black Rock Panthers. Of course, both Kay and Braid expressed that it was worth it. Exchanging 1,600 gold coins for a Great Knight level combat ally was incredibly cost-effective. Chapter 35, A new trade route. In the deep of night, the moonlight was bright and clear. In the meditation room, Sunan sat cross-legged on the ground, gazing at the panel before him. Sunan Anastas, male, human, 17 years old. Spirit, 15.23/physique, 12.83. Skills. Star Ring Meditation Method LV4, 12759/20,000. Potion Making LV3, 108/6000. Biological Modification LV2, 319/3000. Puppet Crafting LV2, 1701/3000. Nearly 5 months had passed since his promotion to a second-level wizard apprentice, and the Star Ring Meditation method still needed about 1/3 more proficiency to level up. The speed of constructing the star rings is still too slow. When I return, I need to try using the secondary active potions to synthesize more efficient potions. Sunan thought to himself. With his current physique and spirit, taking higher-tier potions should pose no problem. The key issue, however, was the cost. Since his potion-making skill had reached level 3, his success rate for creating secondary active potions had significantly increased, thereby reducing the costs as well. Currently, the cost of one secondary active potion was about just over 8 gold coins. In contrast, synthesizing a low-tier first-grade active potion cost around 100 gold coins. For a noticeable improvement in meditation efficiency, it would have to be at least a first-grade superior active potion, which would likely cost no less than 200 gold coins. That's 200 gold coins a month, adding up to 2,400 gold coins a year. Almost equivalent to half a year's tax revenue for Blackstone City. If I were to synthesize a second-grade potion, the costs would soar to at least 1,000 gold coins. Sunan frowned slightly. Blackstone City was currently in a period of rapid development, requiring a substantial financial investment for both expanding the army and further developing the Blackstone mine. Even if Kay didn't mind, Sunan couldn't afford to take too many gold coins for his own use. After all, the growth and strengthening of Blackstone City were equally important. I still need to find a way to increase income. Sunan looked at the active potions beside him, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. Perhaps he could try selling zero-grade potions. For example, strength potions, healing potions, and swiftness potions. During the battle against the Black Scale Lizards, the cavalry had used strength and healing potions, receiving quite positive feedback afterward. If these potions were sold, surely many knights would be interested. Of course, the potions sold externally would have to be differentiated from those used by the knights of Blackstone City. For instance, he could dilute each potion to create 3 bottles. This way, he could sell more and earn more gold coins. The more Sunan thought about it, the more feasible it seemed. He decided to produce a batch of finished potions before leaving and hand them over to the Firefox Trading Company for a trial run. If the response was good enough, he could return and expand the scale. As long as this trade route succeeded, he wouldn't have to worry about the materials needed to synthesize superior active potions. Let's do it! Sunan felt a surge of excitement, rising and stepping outside. The dim night enveloped the entire courtyard, which appeared eerily silent. Yet only Sunan could sense that the hidden dragon was lying under the courtyard wall, about 10 meters away, sleeping soundly. During this time, he had performed over 10 blood exchange operations on the hidden dragon, raising its dragon lizard bloodline concentration by more than 10 percentage points. Now the hidden dragon's bloodline concentration had surpassed 35%, and its body had grown larger, enhancing its physical strength to that of a mid-level Great Knight. Now, even facing a peak Great Knight, the hidden dragon would stand a fighting chance. Thus, Sunan decided to take the hidden dragon along with him to Stone Bell City. With its color-changing and reality transformation abilities, it could remain undetected even when entering the city. Plus, it would serve as a mount for traveling. A win-win situation. As for the original Black Rock Panther, Sunan had casually gifted it to Braid. The rune gems are also ready. His encounter with the Black Sword Knight had proven the potency and practicality of the rune gems. Even a powerful initial Great Knight could not withstand the effects of a lightning rune gem. Therefore, over the past few days, Sunan had been crafting more than 10 attack-type rune gems. He now had over 30 rune gems in his possession. He was essentially a hidden human artillery. In addition to the hidden dragon and rune gems, he also had spell scrolls and the Bloodvine Ring as backup cards. One could say that as long as he wasn't facing a legendary knight, he at least had the means to protect himself regardless of the enemy. Are you planning to sell potions? When Sunan presented the batch of potions he had spent 3 days crafting to Kay, the latter was momentarily taken aback. Yes. Sunan nodded, pointing at the potions. These are diluted potions, with effects roughly 1/3 of the original. Each bottle will be around 70 silver coins. We can sell them directly to the Firefox Trading Company at a price of 2 gold coins. Kay's eyes lit up immediately. Although Blackstone City's income had far exceeded previous levels, he often felt as though money was still tight. If they could open up another profitable channel, it would undoubtedly alleviate the current financial strain considerably. However, Kay soon hesitated. Isn't the price a bit high? Selling to the Firefox Trading Company would mean they would mark up the price for external sales. And for a junior knight, unless they had territory or a village, their combined income for the year wouldn't exceed 10 gold coins. Would they be willing to part with a fifth or more of their annual income just to buy a potion? This world is far from peaceful, with conflicts erupting everywhere, especially in the kingdom of Jinhua, where the Firefox Trading Company is located. In recent years, there have been frequent wars. If a potion could save their lives in a critical moment for just a few gold coins, many would be willing to buy. Sunan picked up a potion and gently shook it. To be honest, if we had channels in the kingdom of Jinhua, we could handle this business ourselves, and the profits would be even greater. Kay was swayed by Sunan's words. Upon reflection, many lords in the kingdom of Jinhua were actively seeking to bolster their military forces. If a potion appeared that could temporarily enhance a knight's abilities, even if just for a short time, it would likely spark fierce competition among them. If one didn't buy it, what if their enemies did? This venture had great potential. All right, I'll contact Mujir right away. Kay, known for his decisive character, made up his mind quickly after recognizing the profit to be made, turning to send word to the kingdom of Jinhua without hesitation. After arranging everything, he turned back to Sunan and asked, "Are you leaving now?" "Yes." Sunan nodded. "Be careful." Kay patted Sunan's shoulder. "The Starfire cult won't give up easily after failing to assassinate us." Sunan smiled and replied, "Don't worry. I'm going out to find them this time." Kay laughed heartily, "Rest assured, I'll be in the barracks. If any assassins dare to come, I promise they'll return empty-handed." After exchanging pleasantries, Sunan left the barracks. As he stepped out of Blackstone City and walked a short distance, he suddenly felt a chill on his face. Looking up, he noticed that snowflakes had begun to fall from the sky, glistening like crystals and landing softly on his skin. It was snowing. Sunan reached out to catch the flakes, feeling the cold crystals melt into droplets in his palm. The first snow of the frostfall month. Sunan smiled faintly. With the thought, energy particles began to form a faint aura around his body, isolating him from the snow. He then leaped onto the back of the hidden dragon. "Let's go!" The hidden dragon let out a low hiss and revealed its form, setting off at a gallop across the wilderness. Chapter 36, Haunted. The bright moonlight poured into the alleys of Stone Bell City, where melodious music drifted from a tavern, resembling a nocturne. Through the windows, one could see the roaring fire in the hearth, radiating a warm glow. At the entrance hung a wooden sign with the words Golden Wheat Tavern. Sunan pushed open the wooden door and stepped inside, immediately greeted by the lively and boisterous atmosphere. The air was thick with the scent of hormones, mingling with the strong smell of alcohol. Raucous men played dice and drank, while flamboyantly dressed waitresses weaved between tables, their bare thighs flashing before the eyes of patrons. Sunan skillfully found a table in the corner, pulling out a few silver coins to slip into the cleavage of a passing waitress. "The usual." The waitress shot him a flirtatious glance before bringing over a mug of wheat beer and some food. Wheat beer had a low alcohol content, lacking in flavor, with a rough texture and a slightly sour taste. Yet even such low-quality beer was a rare treat for the lower class, most of whom would be satisfied with just a single mug. Sunan rarely drank, and when he did, it was usually top-shelf wine. The tavern's inferior wheat beer was almost unpalatable to him. The food was similarly simplistic, cooked with the most basic methods. No pepper, message, soy sauce, honey, or cream. Just boiled or roasted and sprinkled with salt. In this world, sugar was considered a luxury, and spices were exorbitantly expensive, typically only appearing on the tables of the nobility. Sunan ordered the beer and food merely for appearances, to avoid drawing too much attention to himself in the tavern. Generally speaking, taverns were good places for boasting and showing off, where one could hear all kinds of drunken tales about past glories. So, after arriving in Stone Bell City, Sunan made it a habit to visit the tavern every evening to gather information. The rest of the time, he was conducting covert investigations around the Starfire cult's base, which he had learned about from the Black Sword Knight. Unfortunately, he had found nothing over the past 3 days. If I can't uncover anything tonight, I'll just grab someone and interrogate them. Sunan contemplated silently. At that moment, the chatter from a nearby table suddenly caught his attention. Have you heard? Lord Kubero's estate in the north of the city is haunted. Haunted? Don't be ridiculous. How could there be ghosts in this world? I'm serious. My brother-in-law is serving under Lord Kubero, and ever since the haunting started, Lord Kubero moved out. He even sent a few knights inside, but after several days, nobody returned. Now the whole estate is sealed off. Is that true? Did the knights actually die? If it's really a ghost, it's not surprising that knights couldn't handle it. By the way, is the ghost male or female? What, Lancel, are you interested in female ghosts? Haha, if she's pretty, it's not a problem. The group burst into laughter, quickly shifting the topic to women and more risque matters. Sunan wore a contemplative expression. If ghosts were involved, they certainly existed in this world. The most common type was the ghostly apparition. Generally, individuals who died violently were the most likely to become ghosts. Ghosts typically looked just like they did in life, often bearing marks of the violence they suffered at the time of death. However, ghosts were relatively harmless. Even if they possessed a human, they would only induce a chill. Normal humans could rarely see ghosts. Moreover, ghosts couldn't withstand sunlight, becoming weak and fading away if exposed for too long. Even without sunlight, ghosts usually couldn't last long in the material world. If ghosts were a harmless type, then vengeful spirits were truly capable of causing harm. Vengeful spirits usually harbored deep-seated hatred, preventing them from finding peace after death. Instead, they transformed into undead beings solely focused on revenge. A fully formed vengeful spirit could absorb energy from humans through contact or manipulate the will of weaker individuals through mental hypnosis. These incorporeal beings were immune to physical damage and posed a significant threat to ordinary people. Only knights who had mastered their battle aura could harm them. If a vengeful spirit killed enough humans and absorbed enough soul energy, it would advance to become a powerful evil spirit. Evil spirits typically had a binding property, occupying a territory and transforming it into a ghostly realm. Fully formed evil spirits were not afraid of sunlight or physical damage, even great knights might struggle against them. Above evil spirits, there existed aberrations and malevolent spirits, the latter being terrifying entities capable of threatening an entire nation. The appearance of each malevolent spirit often accompanied the downfall of a country. From the drunken chatter he had overheard, if Lord Kubero's estate was indeed haunted, it was likely by an evil spirit. Evil spirits, hey! Sunan felt a flicker of interest. Evil spirits were excellent materials for creating soul crystals. If he could obtain a soul crystal, he could craft a puppet even stronger than the Black Rock Panther. Forget it, I should focus on the Starfire cult for now. I can investigate the evil spirit later. After listening to the gossip for a while longer, Sunan stood up and walked toward the second floor. The Golden Wheat Tavern also provided accommodation, and he had been staying in a room there for the past few days. Nearby, several waitresses whispered as they watched Sunan ascend the stairs. I bet he's a noble. He has more charisma than any of the second sons of Elwyn that I've seen, and he's even more handsome. Elwyn's son can't compare to him. Just yesterday, I accidentally brushed against his arm. Wow, those muscles are solid. He looks like he wouldn't be very strong, but he's surprisingly well built. Are you feeling it, girl? Pfft. I don't believe you aren't tempted. Hehe, if you really want him, just knock on his door at night and ask if he needs a massage. You might just end up with a little romance. That's a good idea. If you don't go for it, I won't hold back. I never said I wouldn't go. Just wait, I'll try my luck with him tonight. A group of waitresses erupted in laughter, drawing the attention of many patrons around them. Deep in the night, Sandy, having changed into a shorter waitress outfit and lowered her neckline, approached the door to Sunan's room and knocked. Tap, tap. No response. Excuse me, do you need a massage service? She knocked a few more times, but still received no answer. Is he asleep? Feeling a bit disheartened, Sandy was about to turn away when a door nearby creaked open, and a man leaned out. Upon seeing Sandy, a lewd smile spread across his face. "Does your tavern offer massage services? I'd like one too." Sandy glanced at the man's coarse face, her expression flat. "Sorry, the tavern doesn't provide that service. But I just heard." "You must have misheard." Before the man could respond, Sandy turned on her heel and walked away. Meanwhile, in Sunan's room, he was already long gone. Chapter 37, Poor Kuburo. Late at night. The deep, dark night enveloped the entire alley. Standing in the shadows, Sunan observed a brightly lit mansion in the distance. This seemingly ordinary residence, less impressive compared to the opulent noble houses in Stone Bell City, was one of the Starfire cult's bases in the Golden Rock province. Since arriving in Stone Bell City, Sunan had been lurking nearby for 3 days, tracking various comings and goings. Unfortunately, he ultimately discovered that none were related to the hunt for the magical creature. Not wanting to waste more time, he decided to capture someone tonight for interrogation. He didn't have to wait long, a suitable target soon appeared. A man wrapped in a cold weather cloak emerged from the mansion, first surveying his surroundings discreetly before hastily stepping into the night. Sunan didn't immediately follow, instead, he patiently waited a moment before casually stepping out of the alley to walk in the same direction as the man. The hidden dragon had already trailed ahead, ensuring that he wouldn't lose sight of the target. This distance wouldn't raise any alarms for the target. Following the man at a distance, Sunan wound through the streets for nearly half an hour before receiving a message from the hidden dragon indicating that the target had stopped. Sunan quickened his pace. Before long, he arrived at the location where the hidden dragon was stationed. "What's this guy doing here?" Sunan raised an eyebrow as he looked at the modest home. This was just an ordinary house nestled in a residential area, so what was a member of the Starfire cult doing here in the dead of night? Signaling the hidden dragon to remain on standby while keeping watch, Sunan cast a layer of wind-based energy particles around himself and effortlessly leapt over the courtyard wall, landing silently on the ground. As soon as he landed, his keen senses picked up the sounds emanating from the room, and a strange expression crossed his face. "My dear, I miss you so much." "I miss you too, darling honey. Lord Kuburo has been too preoccupied with the issues at the estate to pay attention to me lately. Now we have plenty of time to meet." "That's wonderful. But first, let me savor the taste of Lady Kuburo." This was followed by a series of intimate sounds. A flicker of sympathy arose in Sunan for the unseen Lord Kuburo. Having to deal with an evil spirit was already unfortunate enough, but now to have a cheating wife on top of it was truly pitiful. Shaking his head, Sunan stopped hiding his presence and strode toward the room. He had already sensed that apart from the two people inside, there were no other life forces in the entire house. It made sense, as these two were there for a secret rendezvous and would naturally not bring anyone else along. "Who's there?" The man in the room quickly noticed Sunan's unmasked footsteps. As Sunan pushed the door open, the man had already leaped from the bed, reaching for a weapon placed on the table, his gaze warily fixed on the doorway. Behind him, a glamorous woman, heavily made up, huddled in bed, her expression alarmed as she shrank back against the headboard. "Who are you?" the man demanded sharply. Sunan didn't respond, he raised his hand and shot a bolt of electricity at the man. The man didn't even have time to react before he convulsed and collapsed to the floor, his eyes rolling back as he lost consciousness. Seeing this, the woman in bed screamed, covering her face with her hands, taking a deep breath to prepare for a scream. However, the time it took to gather her breath was too long, and Sunan sent another bolt of electricity her way, rendering her unconscious as well. Closing the door behind him, Sunan used his mage hand to lift the unconscious man off the floor, waking him back up. Before the man could say anything, Sunan cast Charm Human, and the man's gaze immediately turned vacant. "Your name?" "Honey Diamond." "Your position in the Starfire cult?" 3-star initiate. Sunan felt a hint of disappointment. In the Starfire cult, ordinary members were ranked from 1 star to 5 stars, with 3-star initiates being still relatively low level, likely not involved in core affairs. "Do you know anything about the hunt for the magical creature?" "I know." Sunan's spirit lifted slightly. "Tell me in detail." Honey hesitated for a moment before replying blankly, "The ones responsible for this are priests Troy and Ryan. They go out almost every day but have yet to capture that magical creature. The priest is very angry about it." "Going out every day?" Then why haven't I seen anyone coming and going from the estate? They use a secret underground passage to enter and exit the estate. Sunan facepalmed internally, feeling a bit foolish. After all, this was a covered base, and the members of the Starfire cult would certainly not brazenly enter and exit through the front door, or they would have been detected long ago. It was entirely normal for bases to have secret passages. He had simply been stuck in a blind spot in his thinking, failing to consider this aspect. Lack of experience, Sunan mused to himself, then continued his inquiries. Where do the people hunting the magical creature usually go? To the north of the city. Honey replied blankly. I don't know why, but the magical creature's activities have been limited to the northern part of the city, so priests Troy and Ryan have been searching there. Sunan nodded in understanding. It seemed the search area would need to shift to the north. Although he now knew the Starfire cult had a secret passage, who knew where that passage led? If the exit was in some obscure abandoned well or a random residential building, it could take an eternity to find it. Compared to that, it would be better to take a chance in the northern part of the city. Once the Starfire cult discovered that magical creature, the pursuit would certainly cause quite a stir. Separating from the hidden dragon to search would likely yield successful results. The hidden dragon's ability to transform between reality and illusion was exceptionally suited for searching in the complex terrain of a town. As he contemplated, Sunan had already formulated a plan. After a few more questions, and confirming he could no longer extract useful information, he prepared to deal with Honey. However, at that moment, Sunan suddenly sensed something and quickly turned his head toward the nearby table. The room's doors and windows were tightly shut, and only a sliver of moonlight filtered through the cracks, casting silver patterns on the ground and table. A small cat stood on the table, perfectly aligned with the silver patterns, the moonlight illuminating its slender, graceful body, glossy white fur, and ice blue eyes that sparkled like jewels. A cat? Sunan was momentarily taken aback, but then his gaze sharpened. He flipped his wrist, and a ground rune gem appeared between his index and middle fingers, ready to activate at any moment. The doors and windows were shut tight. How had this cat gotten in? Moreover, with his keen senses, how could he not have noticed the cat approaching so closely? Something was off. Just as Sunan was left in doubt, the small cat approached him naturally. Its slender body moved gracefully, taking light steps that embodied a dreamlike elegance. Around its neck, it wore a red ribbon tied to a delicate golden bell. In an instant, Sunan felt as if he were witnessing a refined young lady lazily strolling through her family's courtyard. Reaching the edge of the table, the cat leaped down with agility, landing softly on the ground and raising its head to look at Sunan and Honey with curiosity shimmering in its gem-like blue eyes. Meow, what are you two doing? Chapter 38, Poor Cubero. At this point, Sunan had already realized that the peculiar cat in front of him was likely the magical creature the Starfire cult had been pursuing. However, the cat's sudden ability to speak still surprised him. Among magical creatures, there were indeed individuals with intelligence comparable to or even exceeding that of humans. But that didn't mean these magical beings could communicate normally with humans. Take the hidden dragon, for example. As it evolved, its intelligence would eventually reach a level similar to that of humans, or even higher. However, it still wouldn't be able to speak human languages. It might learn Draconic after awakening its dragon bloodline. Unless someone patiently taught it how to speak, it was unlikely that the hidden dragon would ever be able to converse like a human. So seeing a cat speak human language was quite astonishing to Sunan. Teaching a cat to speak would not be an easy task. Meow, why aren't you talking to me? Noticing Sunan staring at her in silence, the little cat asked earnestly. Her voice was youthful, reminiscent of a 7- or 8-year-old girl, flowing like a mountain spring. Sweet and clear. Snapping back to reality, Sunan replied nonchalantly, Sorry, it's just the first time I've seen such a beautiful cat, and I got a bit lost in thought. Meow, really? Thank you for the compliment. The little cat's eyes sparkled with happiness, her expression brightening. My name is Sunan. What's your name? I'm Amy. How did you get into this room, Amy? I just came in like this. With a graceful leap, Amy vanished into thin air, only to reappear a few meters away on the other side of the room. Spatial teleportation. Sunan's eyes widened in disbelief. In that brief moment, he had sensed a ripple in the space. This strange little cat actually possessed the rare ability to teleport. Now Sunan understood why the Starfire cult had struggled to capture this little cat. While the hidden dragon's ability to transform between reality and illusion allowed for some degree of movement through space, the distance it could cover was ultimately limited by its own speed. In contrast, spatial teleportation enabled instant movement across a certain range, ignoring distance and obstacles. This range could be as small as several hundred meters or as large as several kilometers. For knights, such a power was practically a game-breaking ability. Even Sunan, before mastering the fourth ring spell Dimension Anchor, would have found himself helpless against such a teleportation ability. A cat that had mastered spatial teleportation and could converse like a human. What was this little creature's origin? Sunan's curiosity about Amy grew. It seemed Amy was unaware of the concept of refusal, answering all his questions openly, even about her abilities, displaying a certain innocent charm. Sunan squatted down, trying to adopt a gentle expression as he continued to inquire, "Amy, why did you come here?" Amy leaped back toward Sunan. "Meow, I felt energy particle fluctuations here, so I came to check it out." As she spoke, Amy scrutinized Sunan, her eyes widening slightly. "You have a very strong energy particle presence. You're a wizard apprentice." Sunan raised an eyebrow. "You know about wizard apprentices?" "Of course. My master told me about them. My master is a very powerful wizard." Amy puffed up her chest, a tone of pride evident in her voice. "What's your master's name?" Although conversing with a cat felt bizarre, Sunan patiently continued with his inquiries. "My master just calls himself master." Amy tilted her head in confusion. "Where is your master?" "My master." Amy's demeanor suddenly shifted, her mood darkening. "My master is missing. I took a nap, and when I woke up, my master was gone. Then a bunch of bad guys broke in, rummaging through everything and trying to catch me. Luckily, I was clever and managed to escape in time." "Poor thing," Sunan said gently, reaching out to stroke Amy's back. As he felt the softness of her fur, he pondered quietly. From Amy's words, it was likely that she had come from a wizard's residence. For some unknown reason, that wizard had gone missing, and the Starfire cult had discovered the location and taken everything away. Sunan felt a twinge of regret. The things left behind by the wizard were wasted on the Starfire cult, they couldn't use them anyway. If they were all given to him, he would surely gain a lot. "So why did those bad guys keep chasing you?" Seemingly having not been petted in a while, Amy closed her eyes in enjoyment, not realizing how Sunan knew about her being chased, and answered without hesitation. "I was upset that they stole my master's things, so I followed them into their place, trying to get back my master's stuff. But I got too nervous and took the wrong thing, and then those bad guys kept chasing me to get it back." "What did you take?" Sunan instinctively asked. Amy pawed at the floor, and suddenly a fist-sized orb appeared out of thin air. Sunan sensed that, at the moment the orb appeared, the golden bell around Amy's neck emitted a faint energy particle fluctuation. Clearly, it wasn't an ordinary bell, it was a spatial magical item. Sunan couldn't help but sigh. Here he was, a second-level wizard apprentice, without any spatial magical items, and yet this cat was living better than him. The more he thought about it, the more curious he became about Amy's master. The person who could cultivate a magical creature like Amy must be quite powerful. Perhaps a formidable wizard in their own right. But how had that person managed to ascend to wizard status in today's starry continent? As he pondered, Sunan turned his attention back to the orb. Upon closer inspection, he realized it wasn't just an orb but a perfectly round, translucent, pale yellow amber, with a drop of blood encapsulated inside. "Can I take a look at that?" Sunan asked, pointing at the amber. Amy nodded eagerly. "Of course, but be careful. This thing is a bit strange." Sunan nodded, wrapping a layer of energy particles around his palm before carefully picking up the amber. After pausing for a moment to ensure nothing unusual happened, Sunan quickly concealed the amber within the magic cube while checking its information. Upon seeing the details, his expression shifted to one of surprise. Divine Blood Amber contains 0.05 milliliters of divine blood. Carrying it increases the attraction to energy particles but has a certain degree of mental contamination. Prolonged close contact may alter thoughts and perceptions, leading to a strong and fervent belief in the source of the divine blood. Chapter 39, Divine Blood Amber. Divine Blood. Sunan was surprised to discover that the liquid inside the amber was this substance. After all, the starry continent had been the domain of wizards 1,000 years ago, it was improbable that any deities would foolishly enter the starry continent seeking their own demise. Logically, divine blood should not exist. Could it be that during the millennium since the wizards left, otherworldly deities had entered the starry continent to spread their faith? Sunan couldn't help but think of the star god worshipped by the starfire cult. He had initially believed the star god was merely a fabrication by the upper echelons of the starfire cult to deceive the lower-tier followers, but it seemed that might not be the case. However, if the star god truly existed, why did the cult's followers lack any divine powers, relying solely on typical knightly combat techniques? Or perhaps this divine blood was simply material collected by some wizard 1,000 years ago, left behind until now? Frowning in thought, Sunan shook his head, temporarily setting the matter aside to refocus on the divine blood ember in his hand. After hesitating for a moment, he dispersed the energy particles in his palm and allowed his skin to make contact with the ember. In an instant, he felt a wave of dizziness, as if indistinct whispers were echoing in his ears. His vision seemed to conjure an imposing grand hall, where a towering figure with an indistinct face sat high upon a divine throne, surrounded by countless fervently devoted followers kneeling at its feet. Prayers and praises echoed in his mind, extolling the greatness and omnipotence of the deity. Sunan furrowed his brows, using energy particles to isolate the divine blood ember, causing the sounds and visions in his mind to vanish. This is what they call mental contamination. Sunan's expression grew solemn. Even with his mental power, he was not immune to such contamination. For others, even knights, enduring such a mental influence for an extended period would likely lead to becoming a fanatical devotee. However, while mental contamination is frightening, this thing also has its benefits. Just moments ago, upon contact with the divine blood ember, Sunan had felt a significant increase in his body's ability to attract energy particles from the air. For knights, this could allow their bodies to be continually bathed in energy particles, subtly enhancing their physique. It seemed the Starfire cult utilized the properties of the divine blood ember to instill mental contamination and enhance physical abilities, rapidly cultivating a large number of fanatically devoted knights and swiftly expanding their influence. For wizard apprentices, the divine blood ember also had its advantages. The essence of meditation was to absorb energy particles to strengthen mental power. If the divine blood ember could enhance the absorption of energy particles, it would naturally improve meditation efficiency. The question is, how do I eliminate the mental contamination? Sunan had no desire to become a fanatic of this so-called star god. The magic cube can enhance the effects of synthesized items while reducing side effects. If I have enough divine blood ember, could I use synthesis to weaken the side effects of mental contamination? Sunan's eyes lit up. When he previously synthesized dragon lizard blood and sub-dragon blood using blood from the black scale lizards, he successfully reduced the rejection reaction. If he could synthesize with the divine blood ember, the outcome should be similar. Excited by this thought, Sunan looked expectantly at Amy. Amy, do you have any more of this stuff? No, meow. I only took one piece, Amy shook her head. Sunan felt a bit disappointed but pressed on with another question. Is there a lot of this stuff where the Starfire cult is, those bad guys? Lots, meow. Amy raised her paw and gently tapped the floor, counting out loud. 1, 2, 3, 4, 22, 24, 25. There are 25 pieces. Your counting skills could use some improvement. However, 24 pieces of divine blood ember was still a considerable amount. It made sense, since the Starfire cult could rapidly grow using divine blood ember, they must have a significant supply. Sunan's spirits lifted. If he could get his hands on enough divine blood ember, he might solve the issue of improving meditation efficiency. Amy, can you sell this to me? Sunan asked, shaking the divine blood ember in his hand. What do you want this for? Amy tilted her head in confusion. Meow, if you want it, I can give it to you, but you have to help me with something first. Go ahead. I've been chased by those bad guys and can't even sleep properly. Could you help me get rid of them? Sunan smiled slightly and readily agreed. No problem. He was already planning to deal with the Starfire cult, so this task was just a matter of convenience. Tearing off a piece of tablecloth, he wrapped the divine blood ember and tucked it into his pocket. Then he turned to look at the dazed honey. As someone under the influence of charm human, the target could clearly remember the events occurring around him, and this witness definitely couldn't be left alive. Just as Sunan was about to take care of him, he suddenly felt a shift in his expression and decisively activated the earth rune gem in his hand. A heavy, Pale yellow aura instantly enveloped his entire being. In the next instant, the door burst open with a loud crash. Amidst the flying debris, two crescent-shaped sword energies shot through the air like arrows, slicing toward both Sunan and Amy. Sunan raised his hand to block, the sword energy struck his palm with a resounding bang, holding firm for a moment before exploding into a burst of energy, sending shockwaves that rippled across the yellow aura around him but could not penetrate. Meanwhile, as the sword energy attacked, Amy had already used spatial teleportation to move elsewhere. Swoosh! The sound of slicing air echoed. Two more sword energies rushed in, this time aimed at Sunan and the unconscious noblewoman in the bed. The latter was left defenseless, instantly shredded into a mist of blood by the sword energy. This time, Sunan was prepared. He dodged the sword energy with a swift movement, narrowing his eyes as he looked outside. Two attacks with such precision. Can they sense the positions of people in the room? His gaze flickered as he effortlessly snapped Honey's neck, then dashed out of the room, crossing the courtyard and emerging onto the street. A group of over 20 cloaked figures clad in armor had already surrounded the building. At the forefront were two tall, burly men whose bodies shimmered faintly in the moonlight. Great Knights! Meow! It's you bad guys again! Amy appeared on a rooftop more than 10 meters away, glaring furiously at the Starfire cult members. Sunan immediately understood, this group must be the ones who had been chasing Amy all along. The two great knights at the forefront were likely the priests Troy and Ryan mentioned by Honey. Troy and Ryan ignored Amy's words and instead fixed their watchful gazes on Sunan. Who are you? Sunan was shrouded in a layer of yellow aura, making his appearance hard to discern. However, the fact that he had effortlessly deflected two sword energy attacks made Troy and Ryan wary. Divine blood is on him. At that moment, Ryan pulled out a statuette and glanced at it, his expression changed dramatically, and his piercing gaze shot toward Sunan like a blade. Troy's expression also turned cold as he pointed his sword at Sunan, commanding in a deep voice, "Hand over the item." Sunan didn't waste any words, he raised his hand and shot out a bolt of electricity. Troy and Ryan quickly dodged, but the Starfire cult members behind them couldn't react quickly enough, getting fried by the lightning and turning to ash. Wizard! Seeing their charred comrades, Troy and Ryan's expressions soured, and when they looked back at Sunan, they regarded him as a formidable foe. The two men simultaneously issued orders. Kill him! Chapter 40, The Talented Cat. The battle erupted in an instant. However, contrary to what the Starfire cult members had anticipated, they were the first to be attacked. Almost as soon as Troy's words fell, two members of the Starfire cult let out piercing screams as their bodies were suddenly severed into several pieces, as if torn apart by a beast's claws. What was happening? A sense of shock filled the minds of the Starfire cult members simultaneously. Before they could comprehend the situation, another two comrades were sent flying, their bodies twisting into strange, unnatural angles, and the sickening sound of bones snapping echoed from within. They fell to the ground, convulsing once before falling silent. Finally, Troy reacted, shouting in anger, "Something invisible is nearby. Stay alert." However, his warning only caused panic among his subordinates without any further effect. They had no idea where the invisible enemy was, nor did they know how to defend or retaliate. They could only watch helplessly as one comrade after another was torn apart by attacks that seemed to come from nowhere, their pained cries echoing through the night as they succumbed to death. In just 3 or 4 breaths, more than 10 Starfire cult members had fallen. The remaining ones wore expressions of terror, their faces pale and limbs trembling. Damn it! Troy gritted his teeth as he watched this scene, then suddenly turned to charge at Sunan. Let's take down that guy first. Ryan also came to the realization that this strange scene was the work of Sunan. They had to kill him first. Faced with the two men lunging at him with murderous intent, Sunan remained calm and composed, tossing a rune gem without hesitation. With a whoosh, the gem exploded in mid-air, releasing a blazing red light that engulfed Ryan in a torrent of flames. Ryan's battle aura shield lasted less than a breath before shattering, and the flames quickly enveloped him, transforming him into a towering column of fire. Ah! Amidst the piercing screams, this great knight was instantaneously reduced to ash. Troy felt his scalp tingle, a chill running through him. Although Ryan was not as strong as he was still a junior great knight. To be killed in an instant like that was terrifying. As Sunan's gaze fell on him, a deep-seated fear gripped Troy's heart, and he made a decisive choice to flee. He understood that this person was not someone they could handle. Even if they threw their lives into the fray, they would still be unable to deal with him. If they wanted to retrieve the divine blood potion, they would have to return and ask the priest for assistance. However, as he turned back, Troy was horrified to discover that the men he had brought with him had been entirely wiped out, leaving behind a gruesome scene of severed limbs and blood. Moreover, the surroundings were eerily empty. He still couldn't see the monster that had attacked them. A sense of foreboding surged in Troy's mind. Sure enough, in the next instant, a heavy, overwhelming force struck him from the side, crashing down upon him like a landslide. Boom! Troy was sent flying like a cannonball, soaring over 100 meters before crashing to the ground, spewing a mouthful of blood mixed with bits of flesh. Ignoring the pain, he screamed as he scrambled to his feet, quickly sprinting forward. But faster than him was a bolt of lightning. A streak of light tore through the night, crossing over 100 meters in the blink of an eye, striking at his back. Crack! Countless arcs of electricity erupted, instantly engulfing Troy's entire body. When the blinding light dissipated, Troy lay on the ground, reduced to charred remains, utterly silent. In the distance, Sunan withdrew his hand, his expression indifferent. When facing great night-level enemies, both zero-ring spells and simple energy manipulation had proven to be quite limited. The only truly effective combat method was the rune gems. One rune gem was enough to instantly kill a junior Great Knight. If it wasn't for their high cost, Sunan would have used rune gems as a standard combat method. Meow, Sunan, you're amazing. Amy suddenly appeared at Sunan's feet, looking up at him with admiration. So many bad guys were effortlessly taken care of by Sunan in an instant. That was incredible. By the way, is that big guy who can turn invisible your pet? Amy asked curiously. Sunan was surprised. You can see the hidden dragon. Yet. Amy nodded vigorously. My master said my perception is very sharp, and I can see many things that others can't. Is it similar to the ability of true sight? Sunan pondered. Once the hidden dragon realized it had been discovered, it ceased to hide and revealed itself, its wide eyes scanning Amy up and down. Amy immediately puffed up in fright and darted behind Sunan. Meow! Don't eat me! I'm not tasty! Sunan paused for a moment. At that moment, he had indeed sensed through the magical bond that the hidden dragon was transmitting the thought, this cat looks quite delicious. Can you sense the thoughts of other beings? Amy curled up slightly and replied, not really, but I can sense if others have malicious intentions toward me. Such an ability truly surprised Sunan. He had thought Amy was too naive and innocent, approaching a stranger without hesitation and answering every question. Now it seemed that she had sensed that he meant her no harm, which was why she had been so open. Sunan felt a wave of relief. Fortunately, he hadn't acted greedily when he saw the divine blood amber and the spatial magical item resembling a bell. Otherwise, Amy might have fled by now. But this little cat was quite the multi-talented creature. With abilities like spatial teleportation, a version of true sight, and now this sense of malice detection, it had quite a repertoire of abilities. And who knew if it had even more abilities? After musing for a moment, Sunan approached Ryan's corpse and searched him for any valuables. Earlier, Ryan had used a statuette to determine the presence of the divine blood amber. It was possible that the ability to accurately sense Sunan's location had also stemmed from this statuette. As soon as he touched the statuette, familiar whispers echoed in his ears once again. Suppressing the mental contamination, he examined it closely. However, this item didn't appear to be a magical object. He couldn't deduce its use just by examining its enchanted runes. After studying it for a while without any fruitful results, Sunan decided to crush the statuette, and to his surprise, found another piece of divine blood amber inside. Now I have two. Sunan gleefully placed both pieces of divine blood amber into the magic cube and then checked the synthesis interface. Divine blood amber contains 0.1 milliliters of divine blood. Carrying it increases the attraction to energy particles but has a certain degree of mental contamination. Prolonged close contact may alter thoughts and perceptions, leading to a fervent belief in the source of the divine blood. The synthesized divine blood amber had a description that lacked the term intense before fervent belief, which was present in the earlier version. This confirmed Sunan's previous speculations. Synthesis indeed reduced side effects. Next, if I can find enough divine blood amber, I can create an item that significantly enhances meditation efficiency. A joyful smile spread across Sunan's face. Chapter 41, Waiting for this matter to conclude. With Amy beside him, Sunan quietly returned to his room in the tavern. As soon as he entered, Amy immediately leaped onto the bed, rolling around on the soft sheets. Meow, I haven't slept on such a soft bed in days. Tonight, no one will come to catch me. While that's true, have you forgotten some important things? Throughout the journey back to the tavern, Sunan had been mentally preparing himself, emphasizing to himself that he meant no harm to Amy. He was now ready to start gently guiding her. Sprawled on the bed, Amy lifted her head at his words, pondering for a moment before suddenly remembering something. Meow, I almost forgot. I still need to get my master's things back. The little cat jumped onto Sunan's lap, looking at him with watery eyes. Sunan, you will help me, right? It was good that she remembered. Sunan displayed a warm smile, scratching Amy under the chin. Of course, we're friends. Meow, thank you, Sunan. You're such a good person. Amy's face lit up with enjoyment, and after a moment, she hurriedly asked, so what should we do? Tomorrow night, we'll go to the Starfire cult's base. I'll have the hidden dragon draw out the people inside, and then we'll sneak in to retrieve your things and take the divine blood ember as well, giving them a lesson. Meow, let's do it. Let's give them a lesson. Amy couldn't discern whether the plan was good or bad, but she trusted Sunan. Since he said so, it must be fine. Relaxing, Amy couldn't help but yawn, her sleepy eyes returning to the bed, and she quickly drifted off to sleep. Watching the carefree little cat, Sunan couldn't help but chuckle and shake his head. He sat cross-legged at the foot of the bed and began to meditate. A night without further incidents. The next day, Amy didn't wake up until nearly noon. Meow, I slept so comfortably. With a leap, she jumped onto the table, pawing at the bell hanging around her neck. From her fluffy paw, a crystal-clear, mint leaf-shaped ice crystal materialized. Amy placed the ice crystal near her nose, sniffing it a few times before popping it into her mouth. She looked as if she were savoring some exquisite delicacy. What is this? Sunan asked with curiosity. It's ice mint. It tastes really good. Do you want to try some? Amy generously offered Sunan a piece. He took a look at it and then placed it into the magic cube. Ice mint, carrying it can resist heat and poison, and consuming it has a refreshing effect. So it was a magical plant, no wonder it looked so unique. Sunan glanced at Amy, who was enjoying the ice mint, licking her paw contentedly, appearing utterly relaxed. Chuckling, he moved to the window and sat down, pulling out a book to read. Recently, he had discovered another use for the magic cube. It could serve as a temporary storage device. As long as it was a non-sentient object, he could place it inside the magic cube. Moreover, the magic cube could also shield some special items from energy fluctuations. For instance, the divine blood ember. Whether placed in his pocket or in Amy's bell, it would be sensed by the Starfire cult. However, once stored in the magic cube, even Amy couldn't sense the energy fluctuations of the divine blood ember. From this perspective, the magic cube was undoubtedly a higher-tier existence compared to spatial magical items. The only drawback was that when synthesizing items with the magic cube, he had to take everything out, which was somewhat cumbersome. I still need to find a genuine spatial magical item. Sunan sighed softly, focusing his thoughts back on reading. By evening, he went downstairs to grab a bite to eat, making his presence known to avoid the tavern owner worrying about him being cooped up all day. During dinner, Sunan unexpectedly overheard a piece of news. Did you hear? The Viscount is recruiting warriors to eliminate evil spirits. What evil spirits? Didn't they say Lord Kubero's estate is haunted? It's said to be an evil spirit. Is this really significant enough to alarm the Viscount? After all, several knights have died. The Viscount has even offered a reward of 1,000 gold coins for this. Seriously? 1,000 gold coins? I could never spend that in a lifetime. Several patrons marveled in astonishment. Sunan's eyes flickered, and he finished his meal without raising any suspicion before heading back upstairs. Time gradually passed. As the deep night enveloped Stone Bell City, Sunan glanced out the window at the night sky, then closed his book and stood up. It's time to act. Amy, who had been lazily licking her paws, perked up at his words. Meow, I'm ready. Sunan nodded, pushed open the window, and leaped down, landing silently in the alley behind the tavern. Amy quickly appeared on his shoulder. In the night, the duo dashed out of the alley, racing toward the Starfire cult's base. At this late hour, most of the city's residents had fallen into slumber. The streets were sparsely populated, with only a few drunks sprawled on the roadside. Occasionally, patrolling city guards passed by, but Sunan sensed them in advance and easily avoided detection. Before long, they reached the Starfire cult's base. Looking at the brightly lit mansion in the distance, a cold glint flashed in Sunan's eyes. Go, try to draw out as many people inside as possible. A deep, rumbling hiss echoed behind him, as if a gentle breeze had brushed past, and then everything fell silent again. Deep within the mansion, in the study of the main building, the atmosphere was thick with tension. 4 priests stood with their heads bowed at the desk, not daring to breathe, let alone look at the priest Casper sitting opposite them. 2 of my priests, along with over 20 cult members, were killed overnight, and you still haven't found a single lead on the killer. Casper's piercing gaze swept over the 4, his tone growing increasingly cold. I'm beginning to doubt whether you all have the capability to continue serving as priests. A layer of cold sweat appeared on the foreheads of the 4 priests. An older priest hurriedly spoke up, My lord, we examined the scene and confirmed that most of the cult members died at the hands of some kind of beast, while the body of priest Ryan showed signs of having been burned by intense flames. As for priest Troy, although we haven't found his body, the evidence suggests he might have been incinerated as well. Casper's eyes narrowed, his expression darkening. Are you suggesting that the one who killed them is a legendary knight who raises beasts? And no. The priests hurriedly shook their heads. If a legendary knight with a grudge against the cult had entered Stone Bell City, they would have received news of it in advance. Those capable of wielding elemental powers, aside from legendary knights, could also be wizards. We believe the assailant is likely a wizard, and they are probably connected to the magical creature we've been pursuing. Casper remained silent for a moment before speaking. Regardless, we must retrieve the 2 divine blood amber pieces that were taken. It is unacceptable for them to be lost outside. I don't care what method you use, you must find that wizard. Otherwise, you know the consequences. Yes, my lord. The 4 priests tightened their expressions, responding in unison. Casper waved his hand, dismissing the 4, and moved to the window, gazing out at the vast night sky. This blunder is quite significant. Thankfully, we still have those items. If we manage this properly, it should be enough to compensate for this mistake. With good execution, it's not impossible to rise to a higher level. Once this matter is settled, I'll personally take those items to Stone Bell City. A faint smile appeared on Casper's lips. Boom! Suddenly, a thunderous noise erupted from the distance. Casper's smile froze as he looked toward the direction of the mansion's main gate, where a cloud of dust began to rise. Chapter 42, The Treasure Detector. Boom! The thunderous sound echoed far into the quiet night. Sunan calmly watched the dust rising hundreds of meters away, petting the cat while patiently waiting. Before long, the sounds of shouting and screams erupted from the direction of the mansion. Just by listening, Sunan could imagine the Starfire cult members rushing to the main gate, only to find the area eerily empty, their bewildered expressions, and the sudden, invisible bloody attacks that would leave them terrified and confused. Unless a priest of great knight rank or a higher-ranking official was involved, ordinary Starfire cult members were merely lambs to the slaughter in front of the hidden dragon. They wouldn't realize where the attacks were coming from until death was upon them. The fighting lasted about 4 or 5 minutes, and soon after, the invisible hidden dragon burst out of the mansion, dashing into the distance. Behind it, 3 figures pursued closely. One of them, exuding an impressive presence, sprinted faster than the hidden dragon. Must be a high-ranking great knight. Most likely the priest in charge of this base. The other 2 are also great knights, they should be priests as well. In the Starfire cult base in Stone Bell City, the management consisted of 1 priest and 8 priests. 2 priests had already died in Blackstone City. 2 more had perished in last night's battle. This meant that at most only 2 priests remained in the mansion. Meow, is the hidden dragon going to be okay? Amy asked anxiously. Sunan wasn't sure when she had given the hidden dragon that name. Don't worry, it'll be fine, Sunan reassured her. The hidden dragon's ability to transform between reality and illusion was particularly advantageous in the complex terrain of a town. If it focused solely on fleeing, even a high-ranking great knight wouldn't be able to catch up, they would only end up chasing in circles, getting further away. After waiting patiently for a moment, estimating that the fleeing trio had covered a good distance, Sunan finally revealed himself and walked toward the mansion. He wasn't skilled in stealth. After all, he didn't have the appropriate spells or magical items. But he didn't need to be stealthy. The remaining defenses in the mansion posed no threat to him. Quickly resolving any obstructive foes and locating his target was the most important task. In the chaotic courtyard, a group of Starfire cult members was busy tending to their injured. When they saw a person and a cat striding in, they paused in surprise. Coming back to their senses, one of them immediately realized something was off and raised his weapon, shouting, "Who are you?" Crack! Before he could finish his sentence, a bolt of lightning had already turned him to ash. Following that, more lightning and flames erupted, sweeping across the entire courtyard. None of the Starfire cult members present were even great knights. Sunan easily dispatched them all with his control over energy particles. "Where are the things you are looking for?" Sunan looked at Amy, who was perched on his shoulder. The little creature raised her head, tilting it to sense, then pointed toward the left front. "In that direction. The concentration of energy particles there is very high." Without hesitation, Sunan dashed toward the indicated direction. Along the way, any Starfire cult members who heard the commotion jumped out to block him but were swiftly killed, unable to put up any resistance. The mansion was not large, and in just 4 or 5 minutes, Sunan arrived at the area Amy had pointed out, where the energy particle concentration was high. Before his eyes stood a closed iron door. A splash of acid had corroded a large hole in the door, and Sunan bent down to crawl through the opening, descending a staircase. What lay before him was a spacious underground chamber. The night pearls embedded in the ceiling emitted a soft white glow, illuminating the entire basement as if it were daytime. Surrounding the room were many wooden shelves filled with various items. Most notably, there were about 30 to 40 books. There were also some rings, necklaces, bracelets, and a considerable number of cloaks, swords, and other weapons. Sunan's eyes brightened as he quickly approached the shelves filled with books, scanning the titles. Philosophy of Magic, Biological Studies of Dimensions, Burning Hands, Magical Alerts, Spell Missile, Weakening Ray, Basics of Magical Item Crafting, Compendium of Low-Tier Magical Items, Design and Manufacture of Monocrystal Furnaces, Core of Magic Runes. A dazzling array of books filled Sunan with delight. Among these books, there were 7 or 8 on first ring spell models, and even 1 on second ring spell models. Additionally, many of the other books contained highly practical knowledge. For instance, Basics of Magical Item Crafting could accelerate his learning of magical item crafting. Compendium of Low-Tier Magical Items could provide design blueprints for crafting magical items in the future. Design and Manufacture of Monocrystal Furnaces, as the name suggested, was a blueprint for constructing monocrystal furnaces. Sunan's current laboratory only had a basic furnace. If he could manufacture a monocrystal furnace, the cost of refining black rock panthers would significantly decrease, and he would have a foundational tool for crafting higher-tier puppets. However, I haven't heard of magic rune cores before. Are they magical items? Sunan shook his head. This wasn't the time for such research. The urgent matter was to take the items away. Without hesitation, he began to place all the items into the magic cube. After a moment's thought, he also pried the night pearls from the ceiling and stored them, then turned to Amy. "Are all your master's belongings here?" Amy nodded vigorously. "They're all here." "Good, then let's go find the Divine Blood Amber next." "Sure, meow. The Divine Blood Amber is over there." Amy pointed to the right side. Sunan halted in his tracks, looking at Amy in surprise. "You can sense the location of the Divine Blood Amber." "Meow, I've noted the energy fluctuations of the Divine Blood Amber, so I won't be mistaken." Amy tilted her head, looking as if she was questioning why this was surprising. Sunan was taken aback. He had thought Amy could only sense the concentration of energy particles, but it turned out this little cat could perceive more fundamental energy fluctuations. The difference between the two was monumental. The former could be achieved by any wizard apprentice with sufficient mental strength or by using detection spells, although the range might be limited. The latter, however, could easily serve as a treasure detector. As long as she recorded the energy fluctuations, she could locate similar, or closely related, high-energy items. This was incredibly useful for treasure hunting. Sunan looked at Amy with newfound admiration, as if seeing a valuable treasure. He had initially considered taking Amy back to Blackstone City, but now he was even more determined. With Amy around, whether searching for magical items or exploring wizard legacies, it would undoubtedly be much more convenient. Unaware that Sunan was already planning to take her along, Amy was simply delighted to have her master's belongings back, eagerly urging Sunan to find the divine blood amber. After settling his thoughts, Sunan left the underground chamber, bending down to pass through the opening. Just as he was about to exit, two glowing swords suddenly sliced toward him from either side, aimed directly at his neck and heart. Boom! The door burst open with a thunderous crash. As debris flew, two crescent-shaped sword energies shot through the air like arrows, targeting both Sunan and the unconscious noblewoman in the bed. The latter, caught off guard, was instantly torn apart by the sword energy, turning into a mist of blood. Sunan, now prepared, easily dodged the sword energy with a quick movement, narrowing his eyes as he looked outside. Two attacks with such precision. Is it possible they can sense the positions of people in the room? His gaze flickered as he effortlessly snapped Honey's neck, then dashed out of the room, crossing the courtyard and emerging onto the street. A group of over 20 cloaked figures clad in armor had already surrounded the building. At the forefront were two tall, burly men whose bodies shimmered faintly in the moonlight. Great Knights! Meow! It's you bad guys again! Amy suddenly appeared on a rooftop more than 10 meters away, glaring angrily at the Starfire cult members. Sunan immediately understood, this group must be the ones who had been chasing Amy all along. The two great knights at the forefront were likely the priests Troy and Ryan mentioned by Honey. Troy and Ryan ignored Amy's words and instead fixed their vigilant gazes on Sunan. Who are you? Sunan was enveloped in a layer of yellow aura, obscuring his appearance. However, the fact that he had effortlessly deflected two sword energy attacks made Troy and Ryan wary. Divine blood is on him. At that moment, Ryan pulled out a statuette and glanced at it, his expression changed dramatically, and his piercing gaze shot toward Sunan like a blade. Troy's expression also turned cold, and he pointed his sword at Sunan, commanding in a deep voice, "Hand over the item." Sunan didn't waste any words. He raised his hand and shot out a bolt of electricity. Troy and Ryan quickly dodged, but the Starfire cult members behind them couldn't react quickly enough, getting fried by the lightning and turning to ash. Wizard! Seeing their charred comrades, Troy and Ryan's expressions soured, and when they looked back at Sunan, they regarded him as a formidable foe. The two men simultaneously issued orders. Kill him! Chapter 43, Crushing Soul Emperor Li Yuzong. Testing your soul power is also inconvenient. Li Yuzong's face turned cold, his old eyes narrowing suspiciously. Are you here to register or to cause trouble? The atmosphere instantly became tense. Teacher, I can vouch for Brother Chen. It's truly inconvenient for him. Tang San stepped forward to support Zhou Chen. After all, he was speaking the truth. He had been present 6 years ago when Zhou Chen tested his soul power, and the overwhelming pressure nearly crushed him. So, when the old man suggested testing Zhou Chen's soul power, Tang San was the first to object. As soon as Tang San finished speaking, Li Yuzong sneered, anyone can make empty claims. Then can I vouch for Brother Zhou Chen with the credibility of the 7 Treasure Glazed Tile clan? Ning Rongrong smiled. I also vouch for Zhou Chen with the reputation of the Nether Spirit Cat family, Zhu Zuqing added softly. Seeing these two girls with such significant backgrounds backing Zhou Chen, Li Yuzong's expression grew serious. From what he knew, top sects like the 7 Treasure Glazed Tile clan valued their reputation immensely and wouldn't joke about such matters. Thus, Zhou Chen likely had something special to hide. With that in mind, Li Yuzong sighed, very well, then don't use the soul power crystal. I have another way to test your soul power. Pausing, he continued, extend your hand, and I'll channel a bit of my soul power into you to gauge your soul power level. Come, give me your hand. Without waiting for Zhou Chen to agree, Li Yuzong grabbed Zhou Chen's slender, pale hand, squeezed it a bit, and nodded, your age is suitable. Then he began channeling his soul power into Zhou Chen's palm. However, to Li Yuzong's surprise, the moment he introduced his soul power, Zhou Chen's central earth yellow chi was fully activated. Faced with the foreign soul power invading his body, the central earth yellow chi immediately launched a counterattack, beyond Zhou Chen's control. Crack! In an instant, golden lightning flashed across the sky, accompanied by thunderous booms. Witnessing this celestial phenomenon, everyone present was shocked. Tang San covered his face and muttered, I knew it. Meanwhile, on a clearing within the academy, A middle-aged man in his 50s was dozing on a chair, but the sudden thunder awakened him. What's happening? The man was baffled, then his expression changed as he looked towards the academy entrance. He sensed an immense energy awakening there. I need to check it out. Saying this, golden light flickered around him, and the phantom of a giant bear appeared behind him. He dashed towards the entrance at an incredible speed. Boom! At the academy entrance, visible golden waves radiated from Zhou Chen as the center. The pressure, as heavy as a mountain, enveloped the entire Shrek Academy. Crack! 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 The ground constantly cracked, the table between Zhou Chen and Li Yuzong shattered instantly, and spider web-like fissures spread across the stone floor. Everyone within 100 meters felt engulfed in a golden world. The overwhelming golden waves washed over them, making them feel as if they were carrying a mountain. This was soul power pressure. Instantly, everyone nearby, including Tang San, Xiao Wu, Ning Rongrong, and Zhu Zuqing, as well as a dozen other students and parents waiting to register, were pressed down by the golden waves, unable to stand straight. Those below level 20 were even forced to the ground, unable to move. Only Li Yuzong, the level 63 Soul Emperor, was still resisting. At this moment, Li Yuzong's hand clutched Zhou Chen's, and the relentless central earth yellow qi surged into Li Yuzong's body through their hands. This shocked Li Yuzong, who hastily mobilized all his soul power to defend himself, with 6 soul rings rising from his feet. Li Yuzong hadn't expected such a commotion from merely probing with a sliver of soul power. No wonder the boy said it was inconvenient to test his soul power. This wasn't just inconvenient. It was impossible. Testing was like stirring a hornet's nest. Kid, stop it! Li Yuzong shouted. Though his total soul power exceeded Zhou Chen's level 40, its quality was far inferior to Zhou Chen's formidable golden soul power. Thus, as soon as his soul power encountered Zhou Chen's golden soul power, it melted away like ice meeting the sun. This absolute soul power suppression prevented Li Yuzong from displaying his full strength. The golden soul power pouring into him even made his bones creak under pressure. Should he resort to using soul skills? Li Yuzong smiled bitterly to himself. But if he harmed this boy, he'd be in big trouble. After all, he couldn't believe that such a talented young man didn't have a powerful family backing him. Chapter 44, 1,000 Years in One Sleep. A total of 18 magical items. Half of them were jewelry, while the rest included cloaks, robes, weapons, and other relatively large items. Sunan couldn't help but feel regretful that most of these magical items were severely damaged. They seemed to have existed for a long time, the enchanting runes on their surfaces had long been worn away by the erosion of time, and the magical properties they contained had dissipated as a result. Only 2 magical items showed relatively minor wear on their runes, and with some repairs, they might still be usable. From the number and complexity of the enchanting runes, these 2 magical items were likely at least magical grade, meaning they were genuine wizard items. However, even if they were repaired, they would probably only be of low-grade magical item quality. What a pity! Sunan sighed, then felt a twinge of curiosity. A wizard item wouldn't naturally wear down to this extent without 1,000 years passing. Did Amy's master have a hobby of collecting old wizard items? Turning to Amy, he raised the ring in his hand and asked, "Amy, do you recognize this ring?" Amy glanced at it, nodding. "I recognize it. This was just made by my master not long ago. I saw it in the laboratory before I went to sleep. It's strange. It looks so dirty now." Sunan was taken aback. "You saw the ring before? Was it still new?" "Absolutely. Are you sure you're not mistaken?" Amy thought for a moment, then nodded vigorously. "I'm sure." Sunan couldn't help but take a deep breath. The signs of corrosion on the ring were undoubtedly natural. If what Amy said was true, it meant this ring was made 1,000 years ago. And Amy's master, the wizard who had created this ring, was likely one of those who left the starry continent to explore the multiverse 1,000 years ago. Wait! Sunan quickly realized. If Amy's master left while she was sleeping, did that mean Amy had been asleep for a full 1,000 years? This little creature was over 1,000 years old. Noticing Sunan's astonished gaze, Amy tilted her head in confusion. "What's wrong, meow?" After hesitating for a moment, Sunan asked, "Amy, have you ever seen any wizards besides your master?" "Of course. How many friends does your master have who are wizards? And many wizard apprentices too." I see them every day, but they've all disappeared along with my master. It's strange, meow. The streets used to be full of wizards and wizard apprentices, but since I woke up, I haven't seen a single one. You're the first wizard apprentice I've met in this town. Are there very few wizards around? A breakthrough. This little creature truly was a magical pet that had lived for 1,000 years. But Sunan couldn't understand why Amy's master had left her behind on the starry continent. Why had this little one slept for 1,000 years? Even though he had pieced together part of Amy's backstory, many questions remained unanswered. Sensing something from Sunan's expression, Amy tilted her head in confusion and asked, "What's wrong, meow?" After a moment of hesitation, Sunan shared the story about the wizards leaving the starry continent with her. Upon hearing this, the little cat froze, her eyes wide with shock. "Master, left the starry continent? And abandoned me? Why? Did Amy do something wrong?" Sunan comforted her, saying, "Maybe your master didn't want to abandon you but had no choice. Look at how much stuff your master left behind, it must have been a hurried departure." Upon hearing this, Amy's eyes brightened, and she nodded vigorously. "You're right. I usually don't sleep for that long. It must have been my master's doing. If my master wanted to abandon me, there would have been no need to do this." "Exactly," Sunan said, agreeing with her. Once assured that her master hadn't truly abandoned her, Amy regained her energy, murmuring to herself, "My master will definitely come back. I'll wait here for my master." Sunan thought to himself that this was indeed possible. With the resurgence of the elements 1,000 years later, those wizards who had left might return to the starry continent. Perhaps one of them would be Amy's master. "In that case, would you like to come to my place, Amy?" "Meow, your place?" Amy's ears perked up with interest, but she hesitated. "But if I leave, what if my master comes back and can't find me?" Sunan smiled and replied, "You're your master's magical pet, right?" "Yes. That's all that matters. There's a bond between a wizard and their magical pet. If your master returns, they won't have any trouble finding you." "That makes sense," Amy realized. Sunan continued to gently persuade her, "Besides, if you stay here, those Starfire cult members might come back for you. It's better to leave with me and go somewhere they can't find you." In fact, Amy had already lost the divine blood ember, meaning the Starfire cult could no longer track her using that connection. Yet the naive little cat hadn't considered this point. She simply found Sunan's reasoning convincing and felt a sense of goodwill toward him for helping her twice. She no longer hesitated and happily agreed. Seeing this, a smile flashed in Sunan's eyes. While he had his own selfish motives, he was also genuinely looking out for Amy's well-being. This little creature was too innocent and didn't understand the current realities of the starry continent. Living alone outside would be risky, as even the ability to sense malice wasn't infallible. It was better for her to stick with him, at least she would be well fed and safe. After the excitement faded, Amy shyly said, "But Sunan, would this be too much trouble for you?" "How could it be?" Sunan smiled gently, then pointed to the items on the table. "But if you feel guilty, why not lend me these items for now? When your master returns, we can give everything back." "Sure." Amy agreed without a second thought. After all, these things were of no use to her. "By the way, tomorrow we'll go to your master's residence and see if we can find some clues about why your master left." Finding a wizard's residence from 1,000 years ago was an opportunity Sunan wouldn't want to miss. He might discover something valuable. Amy trusted him completely, cheerfully agreeing. With still 4 or 5 hours until dawn, Sunan didn't want to waste time. He sat cross-legged on the bed, gripping the divine blood ember and began to meditate. 4 hours later, he opened his eyes and immediately checked the panel. Meditation proficiency increased by 287 points. About 3.5 times what it was before. Spirit increased by 0.04. Not bad. Sunan nodded in satisfaction. At this rate, he would be able to construct his 4th star ring in less than a month. If I can craft a 2nd-grade active potion, that efficiency could improve even more. Fortunately, I got over 2,000 gold coins from the Starfire cult. I'll try to synthesize higher-grade potions when I return. In fact, Sunan had also considered setting up a magical plant garden to cultivate a large scale of silver moon flowers for making secondary active potions, which would significantly lower costs. However, planting and nurturing magical plants wasn't as simple as just acquiring land and hiring a few hands. In addition to common environmental factors like climate, soil, and humidity, cultivating magical plants also involved energy density. Given the current energy density of the starry continent, small-scale cultivation of magical plants was barely feasible. To cultivate on a larger scale, one would need to set up rune formations to gather energy particles and artificially increase energy density. The difficulty of cultivation was precisely why the price of silver moon flowers remained high. This was even considering that silver moon flowers were not particularly rare magical plants. If they were more precious, the caretakers would have to possess a certain level of magical plant cultivation knowledge. In short, establishing a magical plant garden was not something that could be accomplished overnight. At least, Blackstone City didn't currently have the manpower and resources to support Sunan in establishing a magical plant garden. Once we reclaim the Shining Territory, I'll consider this matter. Chapter 45, The Bloodstained Mandrake. As night faded and dawn approached, Sunan left the tavern with Amy at the first light of day. Amy's master, the mysterious wizard, resided in the Spiked Stone Valley to the east of Clockstone City. Just over 10 kilometers outside the city lay a pine forest. Following the dense trees eastward and crossing two hills, they entered the Spiked Stone Valley. Once inside the valley, the environment grew increasingly desolate, and the terrain became more rugged. The ground was almost devoid of vegetation, littered with jagged stones and patches of withered grass and thorns sprouting from rock crevices, creaking as the cold wind swept through the mountains. Sunan couldn't help but wonder why the wizard chose such a desolate place to live. However, he reminded himself that 1,000 years had passed, perhaps Spiked Stone Valley was not always like this. Amy lay quietly on Sunan's shoulder, bored, licking her paws. When the sun finally rose over the distant mountains, the pair reached a river bank. Meow, if we follow the river upstream, we'll arrive, Amy pointed ahead. Sunan didn't move immediately but ordered the hidden dragon nearby to scout ahead. This place was already known to the Starfire Church, and if they wanted to capture them, they would likely have someone lying in wait here, so caution was wise. After a thorough search, however, no one was found lurking nearby. It seems those guys are still recovering from last night's battle. Sunan relaxed and confidently walked upstream along the river. Guided by Amy, he quickly discovered a cave nestled in the middle of a rock face. Using wind energy particles to enhance his climbing, Sunan easily scaled the rock wall and entered the cave. Inside, the cave was dark, but the passage was wide and well constructed, showing clear signs of human craftsmanship. Sunan pulled out a luminous pearl as a light source and stepped further inside. At the end of the passage was an extraordinarily spacious circular hall. The floor was laid with square granite tiles, intricately carved with dense, strange patterns resembling a large magical array. However, many of the patterns had faded and blurred, and the magical array had long since become inactive. The walls around him had more than a dozen doors. That door leads to the apprentice living quarters, most of the wizard apprentices rested there. That way leads to the plantation, which used to be filled with all sorts of magical plants and many little spirits, but they're all gone now. That door leads to the warehouse, and that's the spell experiment square. Amy described each door's purpose to Sunan with familiarity. The entire structure was unusually large, with passages branching in all directions and countless rooms, effectively resembling a castle built within the mountains. From the remnants of what seemed to be crystal patterns on the walls, it appeared this place used to be a structure akin to a wizard's tower. But now, it had fallen into disrepair. Sunan had hoped to find some hidden treasures here, but to his dismay, he found nothing of value. The Starfire Church's ability to act was even better than he had anticipated. They had completely emptied the place, leaving nothing worthwhile behind. It's a pity this place is so remote and desolate, otherwise, it could have been a good spot for an experimental lab and magical plantation. Sunan thought regretfully. Since he couldn't find anything of value, he decided not to linger and turned to leave with Amy. As they exited the cave, Sunan suddenly recalled something and asked Amy, "The Starfire Church said you were wandering in the north of the city, why was that?" Amy paused for a moment, then exclaimed, "Meow. I almost forgot. There's something I need to retrieve." Sunan was puzzled. "What is it?" "It's the bloodstained mandrake. That bunch of bad guys stole it, but for some reason, they left it in a large house. I wanted to get it back, but there's a powerful evil spirit guarding it. I can't handle it." The bloodstained mandrake. Sunan was taken aback. He recalled that this was a notoriously sinister magical plant that thrived on living blood. Each time a stem matured, it turned crimson, eventually resembling blood. Once fully matured, the blood-stained mandrake would emit concealed mental fluctuations, creating illusions to lure nearby creatures and devour their souls. After consuming enough souls, the mandrake would give birth to terrifying evil spirits, which would then start killing nearby living beings to consume their souls and grow stronger. Because of these traits, places cultivating blood-stained mandrakes usually required corresponding restraining arrays to prevent disasters caused by evil spirits. Connecting this with the ghost rumors he had heard at the tavern, Sunan quickly understood. The large house Amy mentioned was most likely the estate of Lord Kubero. It seems the Starfire Church designed a scheme to get the blood-stained mandrake into that estate, but what could their purpose be? After a moment of thought, Sunan quickly pieced together the details. Clockstone City was the central city of Silver Moon territory, and the Silver Moon Viscount was one of the nobles at odds with Marquis Jinyan. If an evil spirit emerged in their territory, the Silver Moon Viscount would undoubtedly have to find a way to resolve the issue, otherwise, if left unchecked, the threat of the evil spirit would soon escalate and endanger all of Clockstone City. And relying solely on the knight's strength to eliminate the evil spirit would require a staggering number of lives. Even if they ultimately succeeded in banishing the evil spirit, the Silver Moon territory would inevitably be severely weakened. At that point, Marquis Jinyan and the Starfire Church could seize the opportunity to invade. This incident with the evil spirit was likely another part of Marquis Jinyan's conspiracy to control the Jinyan province. That guy really knows no rest. Sunan inwardly cursed, but quickly began to formulate a plan. Although the blood-stained mandrake was extremely dangerous, it was also a rare magical plant with a wide range of uses. For example, the formula for the nightmare potion he had seen in Ang McLean's diary listed the blood-stained mandrake's juice as a primary ingredient. Ang McLean had searched for decades without finding a blood-stained mandrake, yet in this situation, it was within his grasp. Fate truly had a way of playing tricks. The blood-stained mandrake is the rarest component for making the nightmare potion. All the other materials can be synthesized using the cube. If I can acquire this blood-stained mandrake, I'll be able to continuously produce the nightmare potion. Sunan felt a surge of excitement but quickly calmed himself. Evil spirits are not easy to deal with, it's best to prepare more trump cards before going. He recalled the 2 partially damaged magical items he had acquired last night. If he could repair these 2 magical items, he would undoubtedly be better equipped to confront the evil spirit. Moreover, he shouldn't help the Silver Moon territory without compensation, he still needed to claim the rewards he deserved. Chapter 46, You Can Kneel and Bark Like a Dog. In the inner fortress of Silver Moon, the conference hall was quiet. The Silver Moon Viscount sat alone, rubbing his temples as he sighed deeply in frustration. Since the emergence of the evil spirit incident, he hadn't had a good night's sleep. The ignorant common folk believed that Lord Kubero's estate was haunted, treating it as mere gossip for idle chatter. Yet, only he knew how dire the situation truly was. That was an evil spirit. A legendary undead creature. If mishandled, the entire Clockstone City could turn into a domain of ghosts. To combat the evil spirit in the estate, he had already lost a major knight and 5 others, leaving him feeling like his heart was bleeding. Despite such sacrifices, the evil spirit remained alive and even more ferocious, having consumed the souls of 6 knights. If they didn't eliminate this evil spirit soon, the situation would only worsen. Thinking of this, the Silver Moon Viscount couldn't help but feel a deep-seated hatred for Kubero, who was already imprisoned. If it weren't for that fool being unable to keep an eye on his own wife, letting her be seduced by the Starfire Church and bringing that evil blood-colored flower into the estate, and then later trying to suppress the news out of fear for his reputation, things would never have escalated to this point. Such a self-destructive fool, even killing him 10 times wouldn't quell the anger in his heart. Taking a few deep breaths, the Viscount finally calmed his rage and turned to the secretary beside him. Have all the recruits arrived? They're all here, my lord, the secretary replied, bowing. They're waiting in the reception hall. The Viscount nodded and stood, heading outside. To eliminate the evil spirit, his own forces were definitely insufficient, he needed to recruit some mercenaries or wandering knights. Every additional knight's strength would be valuable against the formidable evil spirit. If only he could find a wizard. Not those charlatans pretending to be wizards, but real ones. Wizards were the true experts in dealing with evil spirits. Unfortunately, wizards were notoriously secretive, and the Viscount had no idea where to find one. I heard the second son of the former Baron Shining has become a wizard, I wonder if that's true or just a rumor. Lost in thought, the Viscount reached the reception hall. He scanned the room and saw over 20 men seated. Mostly armored, robust men in their 30s or 40s. Non-noble knights typically had poorer quality breathing techniques and scarce resources, often only becoming knights in their 30s or 40s. Generally speaking, knight was the endpoint for them. Unless they had extraordinary luck, they could never advance to the rank of major knight. Thus, among those seated in the hall, having even one peak knight was considered good, major knights were out of the question. However, one person's appearance stood out, drawing the Viscount's attention. This individual wore a thin grey robe and a night owl mask, making him particularly conspicuous among the armoured knights. Yet, everyone present had passed initial assessments confirming their knight-level prowess, so the Viscount didn't comment further. He took a seat at the head of the table and waved to the secretary. The secretary stepped forward, glancing around before speaking. First, thank you all for attending the recruitment. The details have been outlined in the recruitment notice, but I must remind you again, the evil spirit in Lord Kubero's estate is extremely powerful, even stronger than knights. A moment's carelessness could lead to death. Even so, do you all still wish to participate? The crowd remained unfazed. The news of the knights who had perished at Kubero's estate had already spread throughout Clockstone City, and they were certainly aware of it. Their willingness to join the recruitment under such circumstances indicated they had steeled themselves for the risks. I have only one question, a burly man said in a deep voice. Is the reward of 1,000 gold coins real? The secretary looked at him and nodded. Of course, it's real. The 1,000 gold coins will be divided among you based on your strength. If anyone unfortunately dies in the estate, we will deliver the money to their designated family members. Hearing this, the knights displayed expressions of delight. Splitting 1,000 gold coins among 20+ people meant even the weakest among them would receive at least 20 or 30 coins, nearly equivalent to 3 or 4 years' worth of income. At that moment, a voice suddenly rang out. If I'm the only one who participates, does that mean I get to keep all 1,000 gold coins for myself? The atmosphere in the hall instantly froze. Everyone turned to see that the speaker was the masked individual who had stood out. Tisk, what a bold claim! Do you even know what you're talking about? Want to hog all the gold coins for yourself? Hey, I wonder if you have the strength to back that up. It's been a while since I've seen someone so arrogant. A multitude of scrutinizing and hostile gazes converged on the masked man. In this line of work as mercenaries and wandering knights, who wasn't difficult to deal with. Seeing someone even bolder than themselves, many felt offended. Kid, if you want to take all the bounty, you'll have to get past me first. A stocky man stepped forward, slapping the heavy iron axe on his back, glaring at the masked man. Since you're so cocky, let's have a duel. Whoever loses kneels and barks like a dog, then withdraws. Are you up for it? Some recognized the burly man as a well-known wandering knight with considerable strength. Already a senior knight. Which only added to the malicious delight in the gazes directed at the masked man. This proposal sounds good. Haha, let's fight. Whoever backs down is a coward. Kid, hurry up and accept, you're not afraid, are you? The knights cheered and egged him on. The Silver Moon Viscount watched the scene with cold eyes, not intervening. To be honest, he was a bit curious about the masked man's background. Anyone who dared to speak like that in this situation was either a fool or extremely confident in their abilities. His gut told him the masked man was likely the latter. Under the watchful eyes of everyone, the masked man, Sunan, simply nodded calmly. Good proposal. Let's do it. He lifted his head to meet the burly man's gaze, a strange light flickering in his masked eyes. Now, you can kneel and bark like a dog. The grin on the burly man's face vanished in an instant, his features turning vacant. In the astonished gazes of the crowd, the burly man slowly knelt on the ground, opening his mouth. Woof. Chapter 47, Enhanced Potion. Silence. The hall was utterly quiet, everyone staring in shock at the scene before them, mouths agape, unable to utter a word. What just happened? They hadn't even started fighting, and this guy had already surrendered? Among them, only the Silver Moon Viscount's eyes lit up, as if he had realized something, a glimmer of surprise flashing across his face. What did you do to him? A man, seemingly a close friend of the burly knight, rushed forward and yanked him off the ground, glaring angrily at Sunan. Sunan replied nonchalantly, just a little trick. What, do you want to try it too? The man faltered under Sunan's indifferent gaze, the words stuck in his throat. At that moment, the burly knight regained his senses. Recalling his earlier actions, his face flushed a deep crimson as he angrily drew his battle axe and charged at Sunan. The crowd gasped in shock. Two knights standing by the Silver Moon Viscount instinctively moved to intervene, but the next second, they saw Sunan wave his hand. A blinding bolt of lightning suddenly appeared, piercing the air and striking the burly knight. Crack! In the blink of an eye, the man collapsed to the ground, charred and lifeless. The hall fell into a second silence. Everyone stared in disbelief at the fallen knight, struggling to comprehend what had just transpired. An advanced knight was so easily defeated? What on earth was that lightning? Clap, clap, clap. Suddenly, applause broke the stillness, snapping everyone back to reality. Turning to look, they saw the Silver Moon Viscount standing, clapping his hands with a broad smile as he gazed at Sunan. Excellent skills, sir. As you said, if you can eliminate that evil spirit, the entire bounty will be yours. At these words, the expressions of the knights turned sour. However, none dared to voice their objections. Not only had the Silver Moon Viscount made a decision, but Sunan's display of power had stripped them of any inclination to resist. Some of the more experienced knights had begun to suspect Sunan's true identity. They knew they had no chance against him and left without a word. Soon, the hall was empty except for Sunan. The Silver Moon Viscount fixed his piercing gaze on Sunan and asked, "What do you go by, sir?" "Ang MacLean. If I'm not mistaken, you are a wizard, right?" "Correct." "Wonderful." Though he had suspected as much, hearing Sunan confirm it filled the Viscount with excitement. "With you here, we can surely deal with that evil spirit." "Dealing with the evil spirit is not the issue," Sunan replied coolly. "However, before I take care of it, I have some conditions." "Please, go ahead." "I would like the 1,000 gold coins paid in advance, replaced with equivalent items of my specification." The Silver Moon Viscount hesitated for a moment but quickly agreed. "Of course, what items do you wish to exchange for?" Sunan handed over a list detailing the materials required for creating secondary active potions, along with a set of potion-making tools. Due to the limited space in the synthesis cube, he hadn't brought his tools, necessitating a new purchase. The Viscount glanced at the list, relieved to find it contained mostly common items. He smiled and said, "I'll arrange for the procurement of these items promptly. You can rest in my estate in the meantime." Sunan accepted the offer without refusal. The Viscount then summoned the steward, instructing him to prepare a room for Sunan and ensure he received attentive service. After Sunan left the hall, one of the remaining knights could no longer hold back. "My lord, you're just going to trust him? What if he takes the items and runs?" The speaker was one of the two remaining major knights under the Silver Moon Viscount. Seeing his doubt, the Viscount smiled, unperturbed. "Urbano, if you were to face him, what are your chances of winning?" Urbano hesitated before answering honestly, "Less than 50%. That man's methods are too strange, I can't see through them." While he too could defeat advanced knights in an instant, he could never match Sunan's ease. Moreover, it was clear that Sunan hadn't exerted his full strength. The image of the burly knight being manipulated like a puppet, kneeling and barking, was still vivid in his mind. Such a technique was truly unfathomable. The Silver Moon Viscount chuckled and shook his head, patting Urbano on the shoulder. "You are bound to lose." Seeing Urbano's discontent, he simply smiled and walked through a side door of the hall. Those unfamiliar with wizards had no idea how terrifying and enigmatic this group truly was. Their powers were beyond ordinary comprehension, belonging to another realm entirely. The Silver Moon Viscount was efficient in his dealings. The next day, a large shipment of silver moon flowers arrived at Sunan's doorstep. Instructing the steward not to allow any disturbances, Sunan began crafting potions. Using materials worth nearly 1,000 gold coins, he ultimately produced 102 bottles of secondary active potions. Sunan then moved on to synthesis. As he had estimated, when he added 22 bottles of secondary active potions, the synthesis interface indicated that the active potion had transformed into a first-grade superior potion. Both its effectiveness and duration had increased. However, the mental power requirement had risen to 8 points. Sunan didn't stop there, he continued to add potions to the synthesis cube. Once the total reached 58 bottles, the synthesis interface suddenly changed. Super Potion, Tier 2/inferior increases mental activity significantly, improves energy particle absorption efficiency, extends meditation time, duration is 48 days and 4 hours, stacking has no additional effect, mental power requirement must be above 13. Not bad. Sunan felt a surge of delight. The effects of this potion were vastly superior to the active potion. Especially the enhancement of energy particle absorption efficiency, which, when combined with blood amber, could result in a synergistic effect greater than the sum of its parts. Additionally, the duration had nearly increased by half. I wonder how the medium and superior grades compare. Sunan continued adding potions. When the total reached 85 bottles, the super potion upgraded to Tier 2 medium. The effect description remained largely unchanged, but the duration increased to 54 days, with the mental power requirement rising to 15. After incorporating 105 bottles, adding the remaining potions he had, Sunan's super potion finally transformed into Tier 2 superior. Super potion, Tier 2/superior increases mental activity significantly, greatly enhances energy particle absorption efficiency, extends meditation time, duration is 62 days and 10 hours, stacking has no additional effect, mental power requirement must be above 18. An 18-point requirement. Sunan shook his head in slight disappointment. His mental power was still below 16, even if he had synthesized a Tier 2 superior super potion, he couldn't use it. However, he quickly rallied his spirits. Producing a Tier 2 medium super potion was already quite an achievement. For now, it would be sufficient. Once his mental power broke through 18, he could synthesize the Tier 2 superior super potion without delay. A single Tier 2 medium super potion costs about 850 gold coins, with effects lasting just under 2 months. That means I might spend 5,000 to 6,000 gold coins a year. Sunan couldn't help but sigh. Being a level 2 witch apprentice already incurs such high expenses, he wondered how many gold coins he would need once he became a full-fledged wizard. Chapter 48, The Magic Coin and Protective Ring. Despite the high expenses, Sunan spared no cost in his quest for power. After consuming the super potion, his meditation efficiency soared to astonishing levels. Following a 4-hour meditation session, the proficiency of the Star Ring meditation skyrocketed by 514 points, and his mental power increased by 0.06. This efficiency was over 6 times what it had been back in Blackstone City. Indeed, the synergy between the super potion and blood amber is remarkable, Sunan thought joyfully. In addition to enhancing meditation, the effects of the super potion significantly accelerated his spell learning progress. In just one day, the learning progress for the spell Magic Missile exceeded 5%. This meant that within a maximum of 20 days, he could master a new first-tier spell. High-level resources really are the key to rapid power enhancement, Sunan sighed with satisfaction, deciding to stay in the Silver Moon Viscount's estate for a while longer to prepare thoroughly before confronting the evil spirit in the estate. During the following days, Sunan settled comfortably into the estate. His daily routine involved meditation, learning spells, repairing magical items, and occasionally playing with Amy, petting the cat. As for the hidden dragon, he had released it in Clockstone City to hunt for food in the nearby woods. With the dual enhancement of the super potion and blood amber, the proficiency of the Star Ring meditation climbed rapidly. On the 13th day in the estate, Sunan successfully reached level 5 in the Star Ring meditation. He had constructed his 4th Star Ring. Sunan Yanist, human male, 17 years old. Mental power, 17.34/physical, 13.77. Skills. Star Ring Meditation LV5, 35/30,000. Potion Making LV3, 727/6000. Biological Modification LV2, 319/3000. Puppet Crafting LV2, 1701/3000. 30,000 Proficiency, I can max that out in less than 2 months. The thought of soon constructing his 5th Star Ring filled Sunan with joy. On the 20th day in the estate, he successfully mastered Magic Missile. This was his first attack-type first-tier spell. Magic Missile created a projectile formed from highly condensed energy particles that shot from his palm. The number and power of the missiles depended on the caster's mental power and spell proficiency. The spell was now fully mastered, as reflected in his panel. With his mental power nearing 18, he could release up to 3 magic missiles simultaneously. He tested it and found that a single magic missile could penetrate 2 centimeters of blackstone iron. Even a heavily armored major knight would not take a hit well. Once my mental power increases further, being able to unleash dozens of magic missiles in a barrage will be terrifying. Amy's previous owner had left behind 8 spell model books. In addition to Magic Missile, they contained Burning Hand, Magic Alarm, Weaken Ray, Comprehend Languages, Magic Disguise, Prismatic Light, and Feather Fall. Among these, only Burning Hand, Weaken Ray, and Prismatic Light were combat spells. After some consideration, Sunan decided to learn Weaken Ray second. Although rune gems had powerful effects, using one cost over 10 gold coins. A single battle could often consume gems worth 50 to 60 gold coins. It was too expensive. Sunan resolved to rely more on spells and energy particle manipulation for combat. Only when facing particularly troublesome enemies would he resort to using rune gems. Otherwise, no amount of gold could withstand such consumption. It's a pity that the super magic technique requires sufficient mental power to master. I can only train in it after becoming a level 3 witch apprentice. If I could master spell silent casting and spell instant casting, it would make casting spells during battles much easier. On the 25th day in the estate, Sunan finally completed the repairs on 2 magical items. Placing the repaired magical items into the cube, the corresponding information quickly appeared. Protective Ring, alchemy/minor magical item. Activating it creates an invisible protective force field around the body. Uses remaining 3/3. Can restore usage by infusing mental power or automatically absorbing stray energy particles. Magic Coin, alchemy/minor magical item. Activating it randomly summons a creature from another world, which will obey the user's commands. The creature will disappear after serving the user for half an hour or upon death. The protective ring resembled an ordinary copper ring, unremarkable in appearance. This suited the wizard's practical nature well. They often preferred to make magical items inconspicuous so that enemies would not pay undue attention to them during battle, allowing for an element of surprise. After testing, Sunan found that the protective force field generated by the ring had substantial defensive capabilities, comparable to a shield spell. However, unlike the shield spell, which could only defend from one direction, the protective ring could cover all angles, providing 360-degree protection against attacks. Counting the protective ring, Sunan now possessed 2 ring-type minor magical items. The other, the Magic Coin, was a relatively rare summoning magical item, its effect similar to a first-tier summon monster spell. However, the advantage was that the creature summoned with the Magic Coin was typically between the strength levels of a junior and peak major knight. This made it significantly stronger than the first-tier summon monster spell. In Sunan's view, the Magic Coin was already quite close to a glimmer-level magical item. Moreover, during the repair of these 2 magical items, Sunan's magical item crafting skill had also reached 100%, allowing him to master this skill. Perfect. I previously acquired a book titled Compendium of Low-Level Magical Items. When I return to Blackstone City, I can try crafting magical items. A powerful wizard must possess numerous magical items. After all, even the most talented wizards couldn't be without weaknesses. In areas where their combat system was lacking, they had to rely on magical items to compensate. Preparations are complete. Next, it's time to deal with the evil spirit. With the Magic Coin and protective ring, Sunan felt more confident about his upcoming mission. When the Silver Moon Viscount received word from the steward that Sir Ang was ready to take action, he let out a huge sigh of relief. Though the wizard had previously informed him that a thorough preparation period was necessary, seeing over 20 days pass without any sign of action had made him increasingly anxious. With each passing day, the evil spirit in Kubero's estate grew stronger. If delayed too long, it might become an irretrievable situation. Fortunately, this wizard was finally ready to act. The Silver Moon Viscount immediately ordered, "Gather the troops, we're heading to Kubero's estate." Chapter 49, The Evil Spirit Estate. Kubero's estate had become a desolate shell in just a month or two, once bustling with life. During the day, it was somewhat tolerable, but at night, it was filled with ghostly shadows. The soldiers tasked with guarding the estate heard strange wailing sounds at night, as if a ghostly woman were lamenting, leaving them unable to sleep soundly. If it weren't for their superiors pushing them, the soldiers would have long since fled. The Silver Moon Viscount had previously sent a team inside to explore. A major knight and 5 others entered, but only one knight emerged, and he was clearly mentally unstable. Standing a short distance away from the estate, the Viscount recalled the loss of the major knight and the others, feeling a pang of regret. "What's the situation inside now?" Sunan asked. The secretary beside him quickly replied, "The estate is now overrun with mandrakes. Most of the original plants have withered away, and sometimes a faint mist appears during the day." Upon hearing this, Sunan's eyes flickered. Mandrakes were beautiful and could be used medicinally, but they were also toxic and had hallucinogenic effects. The mandrakes accompanying the blood-stained mandrakes in the estate would undoubtedly be more potent and hallucinogenic than ordinary ones. The entire estate was saturated with the pollen and strange fragrance of these mandrakes, transforming it into a toxic zone. Anyone below night level entering would likely succumb to poisoning shortly after. Even knights and major knights would struggle to exert even 60 to 70% of their strength in such an environment. Sir Ang, what are your plans? The Silver Moon Viscount asked. Sunan activated a shield spell and casually replied, you all can wait outside. The Viscount was startled. Shouldn't I send someone in with you? No need, Sunan waved his hand dismissively. Knights would be of little use in an evil spirit's domain, they would only hinder him. He didn't want to find himself in fierce combat only to discover that his allies had been ensnared by illusions and turned against him. Clutching a rune gem in his palm, Sunan strode toward the estate. He had left the hidden dragon and Amy outside. Evil spirits relied on perception to locate their prey, and the hidden dragon's camouflage and phasing abilities would be ineffective against them. Its sharp claws would also be useless. As for Amy, she would be even less helpful. Entering the estate, he crossed a threshold, and the light around him dimmed significantly. Everything he saw seemed to have a greyish hue, exuding an atmosphere of death and eeriness. The air temperature dropped noticeably, and a cold wind swept through, carrying faint whimpering sounds. What a strong concentration of negative energy particles! Sunan raised an eyebrow. For wizards specializing in necromancy or those capable of counteracting the effects of negative energy particles on the body, this estate would be a paradise for meditation. Meditating here would at least double his efficiency. Unfortunately, Sunan lacked the means to negate the side effects of negative energy particles, so he had to forego that opportunity. Even if he could, the evil spirit wouldn't let him meditate in peace. After a brief pause, he continued deeper into the estate. Within his line of sight were vividly blooming mandrake flowers. As Sunan entered, the flowers began to sway slightly, their movements synchronized, with the petals subtly turning toward him, creating a chilling effect. However, Sunan remained unfazed, ignoring the mandrakes. In his previous life, he had encountered plenty of sanity-draining entities in games, like the Whispers of Madness, Deathstalkers, and various grotesque monsters from the multiverse. Scenes that would make one question the designer's sanity were all too common. Compared to those, the current situation felt relatively normal. Passing through the empty courtyard, Sunan entered through a side door, traversing the corridor until he reached the main hall. Under the influence of negative energy particles, the furniture had begun to rot and decay. Mandrake vines snaked through the furniture, spreading throughout the hall, nearly engulfing the entire space. Sunan drew a long sword from the cube and severed the obstructing vines, ignoring the faint weeping sounds that emanated around him. After searching several areas, he still found nothing. All he saw were more mandrake flowers. Indeed, without detection spells for spirits, it's virtually impossible to locate the essence of the evil spirit in this domain using just my eyes. Sunan paused, glancing at the strange mist that had spread around him without him noticing. Upon entering the estate, he had activated the protective ring. With the protective field in place, he didn't have to worry about being affected by the toxic mist. However, remaining here for too long would quickly erode the protective field. I need to act quickly. Without further hesitation, Sunan flipped his wrist, revealing a red gem in his palm. In the next moment, a surge of flames erupted around him, spreading violently in all directions. As the flames swept through, the mandrake flowers and vines seemed to panic, thrashing wildly as they attempted to escape, but they were quickly engulfed by the flames and burned fiercely. In an instant, the entire estate began to boil as if oil had been splashed onto a fire. The surrounding whimpering sounds rose to a crescendo. The mist rushed toward the burning mandrakes, seemingly attempting to extinguish the flames. However, the magic fire formed from high-density energy particles was unlike ordinary flames, the mist was utterly ineffective. Sunan moved to several other locations, tossing more fire rune gems. Before long, the entire estate was engulfed in flames. As the mandrake flowers were reduced to charred remains, the strange fragrance and mist in the air visibly dissipated. Ah! A piercing scream suddenly echoed through the air. A strange layer of energy seemed to materialize in the void, causing the rapidly spreading flames to halt abruptly before diminishing at an astonishing speed, eventually vanishing. At the same time, a dark red mandrake flower suddenly appeared in a clearing 100 meters ahead, its petals beautifully open, but at the center, a twisted human face emerged. Beside the mandrake flower stood a girl in a white dress stained with dark red blood, her hair disheveled, and her face pale and contorted. She glared at Sunan with vengeful eyes, a creepy smile spreading across her face. Finally willing to show yourself? Sunan raised an eyebrow. Kikik. Accompanied by the eerie laughter, shadowy figures flickered into existence around him, encircling Sunan. They maintained a humanoid outline, vaguely resembling the faces of those who had died in the estate. Many were the deceased servants and soldiers. Among them were 5 particularly sinister-looking armored warriors. The very knights and major knights who had perished under the Silver Moon Viscount's command. These souls had been transformed into vengeful spirits by the blood-stained mandrake. They paused for a moment before shrieking and lunging at Sunan. Sunan had no intention of dodging, these vengeful spirits could not break through his protective field. He opened his palm, a pure gem appearing out of thin air. In the next instant, a ghostly figure suddenly twisted, being pulled toward him by an invisible force, screaming as it was drawn into the gem. After a flash of strange magical light, the gem took on a peculiar grey hue. Chapter 50, Soul Crystal. The soul acts as a vessel, and the energy it contains is referred to as soul energy, which can be transformed into a soul crystal. In the eyes of many wizards, soul energy is one of the most versatile energies in the multiverse. Unlike elemental energy, which many beings cannot absorb, soul energy is universally absorbable and usable. Soul energy can be said to be the most widely applicable energy across the multiverse. A soul crystal, on the other hand, is the product of a soul dissipating after a life ends, a condensed form of soul energy. Unfortunately, soul crystals are difficult to produce naturally, only certain special entities drop primitive soul crystals. In most cases, wizards obtain soul crystals through artificial means. To artificially create a soul crystal, a vessel must be prepared. The most commonly used vessels are various gemstones. What Sunan was currently doing was the process of artificially creating a soul crystal. Amidst the unwilling shrieks, one ghost after another was drawn into the gem, causing its color to gradually shift towards grey. In just a short time, the vengeful spirits surrounding Sunan were completely absorbed. Is that all? Sunan looked expectantly at the evil spirit. Only this few vengeful souls were insufficient to fully transform the gem into a soul crystal. Seemingly provoked by Sunan's gaze, the evil spirit let out a piercing scream and unleashed a wave of negative energy. Unfortunately, the attack was intercepted by his shield spell. Seeing this, the evil spirit leaped into the air and lunged at Sunan. Is this all the vengeful souls you have? Sunan frowned in dissatisfaction. Ignoring the charging evil spirit, he began to chant complex and obscure syllables. He currently had 3 layers of protection set up. Shield spell, energy particles, and the protective ring. Additionally, a rune gem was ready in his palm, prepared for activation. He had no concerns that the evil spirit could breach his defenses in a short time. As expected, when he was ready to cast his spell, the evil spirit's claw-like hands couldn't even break through the shield. Magic missile. 3 fist-sized missiles shot forth, piercing through the evil spirit's ethereal body like bullets. The spirit emitted a horrendous shriek, and its form visibly dimmed. Sunan remained unfazed, calmly unleashing a second magic missile. The combat quickly escalated. The evil spirit completely abandoned defense. Though, in truth, it couldn't defend. Constantly changing direction to attack Sunan, desperately trying to break through and tear him apart. Unfortunately, every attempt was thwarted by the shield. Sunan focused on launching his magic missiles. By the time the evil spirit managed to tear through the invisible barrier, it had already taken 4 hits from the magic missiles. Its once semi-transparent form looked even more insubstantial, as if it might dissipate at any moment. At this point, the evil spirit finally realized the danger and attempted to retreat. Unfortunately, it was too late. Releasing the 5th magic missile, Sunan then raised the gem in his hand. Before the evil spirit could regain its composure after being hit by 3 more missiles, it was pulled toward the gem by an overwhelming invisible force. Despite its frantic struggles, it was unable to resist the gem's power, ultimately being drawn entirely into it. With the soul's absorption, the gem transformed completely, becoming a grey crystal. Got it. A smile of satisfaction appeared on Sunan's face. Under normal circumstances, he would need the souls of dozens of knights to create even the lowest grade soul crystal. However, with his current mental power, he couldn't extract souls from corpses directly, he could only rely on certain magical items or formations. Unfortunately, he had none. But with the vengeful evil spirit, it was much simpler: weaken their power with a beating and then forcibly absorb them. One evil spirit was worth the souls of 20 to 30 knights. Stowing the crystal away, Sunan turned his gaze toward the blood-stained mandrake nearby. The evil spirit was essentially a manifestation of the blood-stained mandrake's concentrated power, free from the constraints of its floral form. Thus, with the evil spirit's demise, the blood-stained mandrake suffered a heavy blow, visibly wilting. Its size shrank significantly, now standing less than 20 centimeters tall. When Sunan pulled it from the ground, the blood-stained mandrake emitted a sharp, piercing scream, struggling violently to burrow back underground. However, its weakened state couldn't resist Sunan's strength, and he forcibly stuffed it into a silver-plated box. The box's surface was engraved with a sealing array that could contain the blood-stained mandrake's mental energy. As long as the box remained closed, the blood-stained mandrake wouldn't pose a threat. Having completed these tasks, Sunan dusted off his hands and surveyed his surroundings. With the lurking evil spirit eliminated and the blood-stained mandrake sealed, the other mandrakes in the estate began to wither and die in large swathes. Soon, the environment returned to normal. Aside from some dilapidation, there were no signs of abnormalities. However, the air still contained a significant amount of negative energy particles, making it uninhabitable for the time being. Naturally dissipating, it might take 4 to 5 months to return to normal levels. Of course, if a witch apprentice were to purify the area, it could return to normal in just a few days. But Sunan wasn't willing to undertake such a task without compensation. To be honest, 1,000 gold coins for taking down an evil spirit was quite a bargain. Were it not for the blood-stained mandrake and the soul crystal, he wouldn't have accepted such a job. Outside the estate, the Silver Moon Viscount paced back and forth, occasionally glancing at the estate, his anxiety palpable. Not long after Sunan entered, flames erupted within, followed by a cacophony of screams that left him on edge. He considered sending people in to investigate but hesitated, fearing the risks. He was sweating nervously. Fortunately, it wasn't long before Sunan emerged from the estate. Sir Ang. The Silver Moon Viscount rushed to greet him, seemingly hesitant to speak. Sunan stated calmly, "The evil spirit has been eliminated." Upon hearing this, the Viscount let out a long sigh of relief. There are still many negative energy particles lingering in the estate, it shouldn't be inhabited for at least 6 months, Sunan added as a reminder. The Viscount nodded, understanding. In truth, he wouldn't have considered reassigning the estate anyway. Given the bizarre events that had transpired, it would likely remain closed and abandoned. But it didn't matter, as long as Clockstone City remained unaffected, he wouldn't mourn the loss of a mere estate. Thanks to you, Sir Ang, I've arranged a banquet in your honor. I hope you'll grace us with your presence. The Silver Moon Viscount spoke warmly. Having encountered such a powerful wizard, he certainly wouldn't let him leave so easily. If he could recruit Sunan to his territory, he would gladly grant him a town even if it meant losing a small fortune. Unfortunately for the Viscount, Sunan declined without a second thought. No thanks, I have matters to attend to. With that, he turned and left without waiting for the Viscount's response. At that moment, a guard rushed over from a distance, brushing past Sunan. Before Sunan had gone far, his keen hearing allowed him to clearly catch the guard's hushed report to the Silver Moon Viscount. My lord, the Baron Shining has declared war on Blackstone City.